Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, January 26, 2022. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, David Pepper, author of Laboratories of Autocracy, a wake-up call from behind the lines. And meanwhile, just breaking, NBC is reporting Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer to retire. Stephen Breyer to retire.
Breyer retire.
Breyer retire.
We could have come up with a rhyme before the show, but
It just happened
too quickly.
Meanwhile, Democrats rushing Ukraine defense bill through the House as U.S.-Russia talks continue. Russia military drills continue. San Jose, California, first in the country to institute gun ownership requirements like liability insurance. The New York mask mandate reinstated, at least temporarily. The EU relaxes travel rules for vaccinated and COVID-recovered peoples. Nancy Pelosi announces she will seek re-election again. Unclear whether she will keep her pledge, her promise, her solemn swear to step down from leadership. Crypto collapse cost $1 trillion in wealth. Good news, tulips holding steady at 118 per stem. EPA finds soot deadlier than thought. Biden administration looks to up standards. Deaths outpace birth in Michigan for the first time ever with COVID's help. Mark Kelly does not support the censure of Kirsten Sinema. Jessica Cisneros' challenge of Henry Cuellar got a bit of a boost the other day. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Big news about Stephen Breyer. Just got the word. We will be talking about that in the days to come. Obviously, there's going to be hearings that need to happen before, well, I guess really basically a year at this point. But I imagine they're going to move quite quickly.
They should, given the lessons that they should have learned from.
Indeed. And we will see. We will talk about the speculation over the next day or two as to who might replace Stephen Breyer.
Obama. Remember those rumors?
Oh, God. There's no way. There's no way he
No,
wants a job where he has to show up every day.
Oh my
No.
God! He wants to be windsurfing with the Virgin guy. What's his name?
No way.
Branson.
Now, I know that you gave me a look when I said that thing about tulips. Did you know what I was referencing?
No, but
Okay.
I do love tulips.
All right. Yes. Well, no, we're not. I'm not getting you tulips. I'm sorry.
Wow.
Wait. No, Emma Vigland's here.
Yeah,
Yes.
hi.
Sorry.
And I love tulips.
Back when was this? In the 1600s?
Yeah, around the early 17th century.
Tulips, for whatever reason, became almost like a currency.
The experiments in genetics were really taken off at that point, and you could, get certain really specialty types of tulips, and from around, and also you have British exploration, so they're getting tulips and different types of things from all sorts.
In terms of the color, or?
Yeah, exactly, the color, the structure, and so people went crazy.
They went crazy for them, and they became like. Sort of like gold. I mean, they became incredibly valuable. And I don't know exactly how it worked. Like, obviously, tulips don't maintain themselves for next, but they, back in...
The seeds do.
The seeds do. And and there was a period of time where there was just this massive market for tulips. And then all of a sudden, there wasn't.
Sounds like the crypto boom.
Well, that's why I raised that. Now,
is that what you said?
Yeah, I mean, look, the bottom line is, I think, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with crypto, and I can imagine that there's going to be, they're going to find some very good uses for blockchain technology that won't involve silly pictures of an ape or something like that.
Oh.
Yeah. But
you see that video of Paris Hilton and Jimmy Fallon?
Just absolutely ridiculous. And I was like, I didn't know who Paris Hilton was. I was like, what? But
that's insane.
And well, I don't know if I ever saw her on video. I think I saw pictures, but
right.
I don't know.
That was a huge.
Well, other people did.
That was a big deal.
Oh right, well, she had a sex video, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Well, but nevertheless, I did not see that one either, sadly. But the bottom line is that. I'm sure there's value and look, I have baseball cards, and I'm going after my old albums, and I'm looking up. Some of these albums are worth some money.
Yeah.
And but it ebbs and flows, and I guess it's conceivable at one point we will have digital currency. In some ways, we do. It's called a debit card, and so it is a digital currency in that way. But right now, as far as I can tell, these cryptocurrencies are, they're commodities.
They're beanie babies.
That have, maybe a little bit more value than others. Because
it's a speculative bubble. People are trying to inflate the price and sell it to the next guy to get more cash.
We'll see. All right. We're going to play 2 clips right now that I think capture the insanity of the moment in many respects. Here is Martha McCallum. Now, with the exodus that we've seen from Fox News, I think Martha McCallum is the big news person there, right? She's sort of the Walter Cronkite.
Dana Perino kind of, right? Maybe not even.
She's just a commentator. She's never, I don't think she's ever done any
really?
reports. She was a spokesperson for Bush.
I'm sorry, I get some of these blonde women a little confused in my mind.
It's okay. But Martha McCallum, I believe, is now essentially the Walter Cronkite of Fox News. And here she really digs in. You gotta love it when you listen to the guest and you ask the questions that based upon what the guest. She wants to know why we haven't been doing. And if you pay attention to Fox News or the right wing. And all these people are trying to make money off of COVID clicks. One of the big things that they've sort of pivoted to now is therapy. Why isn't there more therapies, treatments? And I'm not sure where this has come from.
It's the monoclonal antibodies thing. So 2 of the monoclonal antibodies don't work for the Omicron, and so they've taken them off the advisory, and there's only 1 left. So there's a lot less monoclonal antibodies to go around, and they're acting as if this is some conspiracy.
Well, I mean, we were told that the monoclonal antibodies work. And now you're telling me they don't?
Yeah, well, that's the
I'm
problem
over
for
it.
Rogan.
I'm done.
I'm done with monoclonal antibodies.
Forget it, Omicron. I'm done playing.
You switched it up on me, so I'm breaking up with you.
Not fair. But here's McCallum asking this doctor, and she did not get the answer that she wanted.
So here's the question. When you have nearly 2,000 people dying in a day, would these people have survived if they were given these antiviral treatments or perhaps steroids that would lower the inflammation in their bodies? Why are so many people still dying given everything that we now have in the treatment cabinet?
Pause it for 1 second. Pause it.
The biggest problem is
pause it. I want you to go back a little bit. But can you imagine all the doctors that are watching this and they're going, Why didn't we try the anti-inflammation things, the steroids? God.
I should have looked a little harder in my apothecary for the right treatment.
That's what frustrates me so much about this is like it's couched as if it's a media critic. Like, look at the liberals; they don't want to entertain all sorts of like ivermectin and all this stuff. It's really like but it's an accusation against all doctors, as if they're overlooking things that would help patients.
Except for the 1 or 2 out of every, like 1,100 that are brave enough to give someone ivermectin. But here we go.
Treatments or perhaps steroids that would lower the inflammation in their bodies. Why are so many people still dying given everything that we now have in the treatment cabinet?
The biggest problem is still going to be unvaccinated individuals getting hospitalized and dying in the hospital. That's what I see. I was in the hospital yesterday. That's the predominant type of person that's getting severe infection. Some of these individuals come to light too late to be able to benefit from the one monoclonal antibody that does work against the Omicron variant. And antivirals are very hard to find. They're rationed, and you need to have some high-risk conditions. But also the fact is some of these patients have been in the hospital for some time, and they may have been infected with Delta. But the primary way to keep yourself alive from COVID-19, especially if you're high risk, is to be vaccinated. Then you don't really get into that situation. But we do have more tools. We are giving these patients all steroids. We're giving them remdesivir, immune modulators when they're in the hospital. But sometimes it's not enough because they're so severely ill and they have so many high-risk factors.
Yeah, I understand. Well, when are we going to get to the point, some people say next month, where these antivirals are readily available so that as soon as someone gets sick, within the first day or two, their doctor can write a prescription and get them on this right away?
I mean, I'm going to completely ignore what you say is the way to save lives. But 30 days from now, or as I just mentioned, 60,000 deaths from now, at least, maybe we'll have therapies that will be available more readily. Is that right, doctor? I mean, just insanity. But it doesn't end there because Fox is a 24-hour news channel.
Right. McCallum's, though, that's supposed to be the real news, as you say. And yet it's indistinguishable from the opinion in terms of what they're actually pushing for that's on at other points in the program.
It's a little more subtle than what we'll see when we get to Tucker a little bit later in the evening, the same day.
We're at a very dangerous moment, Tucker, and I'm not exaggerating. I think this is probably the most important appearance I've had with you in the last 2 years. It is completely clear now that the vaccines don't really work at all against Omicron. In these highly vaccinated and highly boosted countries, rates of infection are incredibly high, and rates of serious disease and death are also rising. The Israelis are predicting that they're going to have more serious cases than they ever had at the peak last year.
Now, why might that be? Because it is that much more virulent, that much more contagious. So even though the percentage of people who get seriously ill from Omicron is less, the sheer number of people who catch it is so much higher, so many multiples higher that we're now like, we're still, I think 3,000 plus was our peak, but we're up there, 2,200 over 7 days. But here's Berenson talking about how the vaccine doesn't, and incidentally, it does provide some protection against infection. Yeah. And then it obviously provides a tremendous amount of protection against death.
He doesn't specify which population is being hit hardest by serious illness and death, and it's the unvaccinated.
Continue.
At least yet.
High, and rates of serious disease and death are also rising. The Israelis are predicting that they're going to have more serious cases than they ever had at the peak last year. And the idea that we would solve this with another booster is just off the charts insane. I have not said this to you before because I'm pretty careful, and I'm pretty careful with the data, but these vaccines, these mRNA vaccines, the mRNA COVID vaccines need to be withdrawn from the market now. No one should get them. No one should get boosted. No one should get double boosted. They are a dangerous and ineffective product at this point against Omicron. The spike that they make your body make that you then produce antibodies to is not the Omicron spike. And Earlier today, Tony Fauci said we're not going to give people monoclonal antibody products, because the first generation products, because they don't work against the Omicron spike. The same logic applies to these mRNA vaccines, and giving people boosters, even if in the very short term it knocks down infection rates, there's a boomerang effect, and that's what they're seeing in all these countries. We are at a dangerous moment, and these products need to be withdrawn.
When you say, so you say they're ineffective, and that's demonstrable to anybody who lives in this country. Everyone you know who's had it, has had COVID. Most of them are fine.
I mean, just whatever, 12 hours earlier, 10 hours earlier, 8 hours earlier on the exact same network, you had a doctor saying we need to vaccinate people because it's the one thing that we can help keeping people from dying.
It's despicable. I think it's also really gross when people comment on when Barrettson gets, banned from Twitter or whatever for spreading this kind of, awful misinformation. Just comment on, isn't it bad that he got suspended? And I think, even if you are a free speech absolutist, you should make the comment on he's a raving lunatic that's getting people killed. And if you think that he should be allowed to continue, uncensored, then just own that part of it. I
mean, there's, these platforms do have a responsibility to mitigate negligent homicide, for example. And that's basically what the Fox anchors and the
I don't understand how he gets away with this without somebody coming and suing. I really don't.
Well, you can't prove causality, right?
So how do we do class action lawsuits in this country? Do we allow a whole class of people to say, hey, my dad watched Hannity and all these folks and decided not to get the vaccine because of it. Can I get some money for it? I think I would like to see that, frankly. I think after a certain point of, after a certain level of media power, companies should be accountable for that stuff.
I would think. All right, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, David Pepper, author of Laboratories of Autocracy, a wake-up call from behind the lines. Folks, just a reminder, it's your support that makes the show possible. You can become a member today by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. Or, well, not just or. I mean, when you do, you support the free show. I'm not sure what's going on with ads these days. We don't have many at the moment, but when we do, you get the show free of ads. And you also get the fun half of the program every day. Also, don't forget, Majority Live, get your tickets. Boston, May 15th. We may have some other dates to announce soon. But May 15th, 2 p.m. in Boston. We'll see you there. You suck at hockey, but you can come and see us anyways. Also, don't forget the AM Quickie, amquickie.com every morning. Get an email with some top stories. All right. Want to welcome to the program David Pepper, former chair of the Ohio Democratic Party, author of Laboratories of Autocracy, a wake-up call from behind the lines. David, welcome to the program. I'm here with Emma Vigeland.
Thank you. Good to be with you guys.
So let's, I want to get into your assessment of Ohio. And you start off your piece with voting lines that were taking place in 2020. And the only thing I could think of was Ken Blackwell, because that was the sort of in the 2004 election. And I can't remember now off the top of my head the name of the voting machines, but there was closures of sites, and the voting machine was a digital voting machine. And I believe the company was owned by a guy who was one of the co-chairs of George W. Bush's re-election campaign. But before that, I want to talk about your race in 2010 for state auditor, because that seems to unlock the key, or at least your understanding of what was going on around that time.
Yeah, so it's sort of ancient history in my own mind, but not that long ago, Ohio was a state with a Democratic state house, a Democratic majority congressional delegation. And like around the country, 2010 was the race where all that changed. And after 2010, they rigged this state as much as it's ever been rigged, and they did around the country. And I happened to be running for an office in 2010, the state auditor. As unknown as that office may be, it sits on the board that draws the lines. And I go through this race in the book, draws the state house lines, correct? Which, as I explain in the book, while everyone focuses on the Congress, the gerrymandering of state house districts is the key to everything they're doing, because it means in states they have basically an ability to do anything they want with no accountability. It's more important in a long-term way than even the gerrymandering of Congress, because it's through the states that they're doing most of their anti-democratic attacks. So in the Karl Rove, Koch brothers, ALEC mindset, the state houses are the key, and so gerrymandering is the key. So I'm running against this total unknown guy who they kind of recruited late, because the sitting auditor was recruited to be John Kasich's lieutenant governor. I outraised the guy 4 or 5 to 1. I get all the endorsements, including by papers that had endorsed Kasich. And then I mentioned in the book, all of a sudden, late in the race, I start seeing like all these checks, like $5 and $10. This was before online small dollar giving, where it was easy, from like Utah and Illinois, little coal towns. Okay. I'm thinking, why in the world do these people care about who the state auditor of Ohio is? And it was clear when you look at it that forces that could care less about the auditor, but really rely on the gerrymandered state house, saw that he needed major help, and they converged to help him, ultimately help him in a big way. The party did as well. He ended up beating me. But the point was, they were focused in a way that our side wasn't. I didn't get a lot of support around the country, except for people I knew. They were focused in 2010, Karl Rove and many others, on this need when they were dying, because Obama had just won through this broad majority, to grab hold of state houses so they could control them. And we saw that play out here, all around the country. And Karl Rove sort of snuck in and basically grabbed all these state houses, and the rest we've been living with ever since. And I saw it in my own race. On our side, most people could have cared less or knew very little about our process to draw maps. The other side, they knew about it so much that coal magnates were forcing miners in Utah, or staff members, I don't know if they were actual miners, to give money to a statewide race in Ohio to make sure that they could lock in that state house. And as I say, the rest is history. We've been fighting back ever since, and usually not successfully.
And we should say that in 2010, and we've spoken to a couple of people about this, that Thomas Hoffler, who was known as the godfather of gerrymandering for the Republicans, in 2010 he started running these doing models for different district lines. I don't know if he did one for Ohio, but that would basically show how you gerrymander these places. And the technology was such by 2010 that it was like a fundamentally different process than it would have been in 2000 or any year prior. And of course, this happens every 10 years because of the census. Right. So tell us what the implications of this. And when we say undemocratic, what we literally mean is you just don't need as many votes. You can control the state.
Right.
And still get less votes than the other party, essentially.
Right. So and you're right. So we won the state house in 2008 in Ohio, even though they had gerrymandered in 2001. I mean, back then it just wasn't as sort of locked in as it is with the new technology. So with the gerrymandering of 2011, just to be clear, so Obama, we have a great apples to apples comparison. I put this in the book. Obama won Ohio by about the same amount in 2012 as he did 2008. So we have an apples to apples. Their gerrymandering was so effective that even though Ohio was blue by about the same number, a 10-8 congressional delegation, 10 Democrat, 8 Republican, 4 years later was 12-4 the other way, and that 12-4 lasted the entire decade, even though the numbers in 8 and 12 were more or less the same. A majority Democratic state house went from mid-50s Democrat to 40s Republican to a supermajority the other way. It lasted the whole decade again. And 99% of the districts that were drawn in 2011 held to the rigging the entire decade. And it's even worse than all that. And I go through this because one of the things I'm trying to get people to understand is stop being shocked by the horrific behavior of these state houses. Texas with what they're doing to women's reproductive rights and guns. Once you understand the makeup of these places, you will no longer be shocked, but no one's really dug in. So I said they basically rigged themselves a supermajority in Ohio all decade. And by the way, this is true all across the country. But let's say they have 60 plus seats in that supermajority, no matter what. 17 of those seats for an entire decade averaged 50-point margins of victory. 22 averaged 30, another 12 averaged 20. 50 seats basically were guaranteed a 20 plus margin of victory, 64 or better. The next 12 averaged 10. So it's not just that they get a majority. We're dealing now with a generation of people in office their entire career who've essentially not been in a democratic system. They haven't been in real elections. So everything that we expect people in a functioning democracy to do, they're doing essentially the opposite. Their entire careers are basically as non-democratic officials who win elections that are guaranteed for them. And that's explains so much of why they keep behaving badly and why they're always attacking democracy, because they've never been in it. And they understand that if they actually faced real voters and real democracy, most of them would actually lose power. And by the way, one other quick thing on how undemocratic these maps are. 18 was a blue wave. It didn't feel like that halfway through election night, but in hindsight, it was a major blue wave. And in multiple states, and this is sort of like Orban-style governance, in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania in particular, Democratic voters, a majority voted decisively for state house members to be Democrats. So the majority spoke. The districts were so rigged that in those states, you still had a Republican majority. In Wisconsin, a supermajority, even though that represents a minority of the voters. That's how rigged it's been in state after state.
Okay, and so let me just restate it so that people understand it. I use this statistic quite a bit for Wisconsin just because it has stuck in my head. But in Wisconsin, if I remember correctly, the 52% of the people who went to the polls voted for a Democrat. However, in the state house, 65, I think it is,
right,
representatives out of 100 are Republican. So they have a 65% majority.
Correct.
In the state house where 52% of people voted for the opposing party. And that is just the way that they're apportioned. And your argument—
it's minority rule locked in,
and
no matter what the voters do.
Is that not only is that a problem in terms of just the sheer notion of democracy, that you would imagine at the very least, it would be close. I mean, if a majority of people vote for Democrats, you would think that at least the state house would be sort of close. There wouldn't be a super majority of Republicans. But you're also arguing that it has a qualitative impact on the people who are elected in terms of how far they're willing to go, because they know they are so unaccountable to the voters because of the nature of the gerrymandering in their particular district.
Right. And the other thing I go through, and a lot of this stuff I thought through more as I wrote, the things you do to succeed in their non-democratic gerrymandered world, you have to be as extreme as possible to fend off a primary. Public outcomes don't really matter to you because the voters aren't really given a choice anyway, but keeping the private players happy is really important to you. That's why you have so much privatization of public assets, be it for-profit charter schools, the grid falling apart in Texas, you name it. But so they have all these incentives in their world. Almost every one of those incentives actually behaving that way in a real democracy, they would guarantee their loss. So they behave for years in their careers in ways that are rewarded in this non-democratic world. If they ever faced real democracy, their power would be gone. So the thing that should scare us all is these people who have every incentive to not want democracy to be robust where they are also have hands on levers of democracy. And that's why they have to re-rig the districts. They want to suppress the votes of the opposition party because they know that if they ever faced real democracy, real districts, they would lose. And by the way, one example of this that surprised people last November, at least in Ohio, which is a conservative state in many parts of our state, we had many people running for school board, anti-vax, anti-CRT, in non-gerrymandered districts, right? Because of school board, most of them lost. They're behaving exactly like the state house members, but in a gerrymandered world, that politics feels good. But back in even a conservative neighborhood that's a school district, non-gerrymandered, the crazy all lost, or almost all of them. So they see that, they know that they can't keep, and it sort of ratchets up together. They can't keep being as extreme as they are or give so much away to the private as they do unless they keep rigging more extremely. And then the more they rig, the more they can be extreme. And that's why the downward spiral will continue. I don't mean to be so bleak until we get in there to the unaccountable state houses through federal action, which they need to take, through the way we organize politically, until we bring accountability back and real democracy back in these state houses. Every incentive is for them to just keep doing what they're doing and frankly go in even worse directions. And we've seen that acceleration, especially after Democrats started winning statewide in 2016. We are seeing the acceleration of this extremism on democracy on issues, especially as they've been threatened by statewide officials. You know, Governor Evers won in 2018. He won a majority. What did that minority do? They started attacking the powers of the guy who'd actually won a majority of the vote. And so and that's what they're doing now with elections officials. Like, it just keeps going and going. We have to get to the heart of the problem, which is these unaccountable state houses, or it will keep going.
What's your response to states like Illinois, where Democrats were miraculously, in some cases, because Republicans dominate state houses, able to gain power and then are participating in kind of offensive defense by gerrymandering themselves? To me, it's like a little too late, but also speaks to the rot of the system that you talk about.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is I think gerrymandering leads to very poor outcomes long term, no matter what. I mean, you want a robust democracy. I understand that in a world where there aren't rules, you're going to have a race to the bottom. And if Ohio and Texas are all doing it, Illinois is going to do it. And this is why I'm still so upset that they didn't pass a couple weeks ago what they need to pass in Washington, because that would establish the Freedom to Vote Act, John Lewis Act, included ground rules that would stop gerrymandering from happening everywhere. So there isn't a temptation that can be understandable to compete with the Republican gerrymandering through Democratic gerrymandering, and would actually clean it up for everybody. And in the end, I'm a Democrat, but I'm also about good results for everyday people and good representation. And you just don't get that in a gerrymandered world, wherever it is. Now I will say, a lot of Democratic state houses probably don't meet every standard of good government, but they certainly aren't attacking democracy every day in the way the Republicans are. So I'm not going to also do both sides to it. But ideally, what you would have, and frankly, our big win in Ohio a couple weeks ago showed this is possible. You would have standards in place that make it so that neither side can truly, seize and keep power through rigging districts. And in the end, if Illinois got a blue legislature, because that's how people vote, which they do. Michigan would be probably blue. Ohio would probably go back and forth. And these people would actually have incentives to be good public officials. A gerrymandered world gives them incentives to do almost the opposite of everything we would want in a good public official.
Let's talk about some of those some of those things that are problematic that you write about in the book that are Ohio specific, but I imagine would also apply to other states with this same dynamic. And we should say, I think from my perspective, it has always been the case that the smaller the government, the more opportunity there is for there to be this type of corruption, because frankly, there's less oversight. There's a lack of media, and we can talk about some of the ideas that you had at the end in terms of the way you deal with this. But there's just more opportunity. You get a bigger bang for your buck when you're looking to buy essentially a politician at that level.
Right. Yeah, and two things. The founding fathers, and as I put in the book, they worried about that. The founding fathers believed, James Madison wrote, and I'll say it my way, that state houses were the potential backdoor to undermine our nation's democracy because of certain fundamental weaknesses with that smaller level of government, much more anonymous than federal or even local mayors might be. And guess who discovered the same thing? The Koch brothers and Alec. These state houses, for a combination of reasons, they have a lot of power over democracy, as put in the Constitution. They have a lot of power over substance, energy, taxes, workers, you name it, the environment, social policy. But almost no one almost no average people are paying attention to these places. They can't even name their state rep. But ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, Koch brothers, the NRA, and everyone else figured out, my God, these are the best places. We can go to them. We can get things done that in most cases are highly unpopular, that we would never get done in Congress. We can get them done in the State House, and half the time, no one even knows. So yeah, they've become in many ways the Achilles heel of governance, because they're very weak in terms of people understanding what they're doing, but they're very strong in terms of what they can actually do, and that ends up being the true problem. And Democrats, and I would say, have contributed to this, and I say this with respect, but because we get so focused on the excitement of a presidential campaign or a few Senate seats, that's what we give our money to, that's what we organize around, that's when we show up to vote. The Koch brothers have decided we want to win the presidency if we can, but they don't care if someone's a boring, do nothing legislator in Columbus. If that person's voting for their agenda, they're getting what they want to get done. So these state houses have literally become the vehicle of doing almost everything they need to do. And this is why the filibuster discussion is so frustrating. They don't care if Washington does nothing. All they need out of Washington are judges to uphold these state laws and a few other things, because almost their entire agenda of trickle-down economics and so much that goes with it is actually totally fulfillable through state houses. And that's what they're doing right now. Until everyone else figures it out, they're going to keep winning that game.
Is there also not a problem that, Democratic voters are not paying attention to this on some level, but also there is a lack of a statewide structure within the Democratic Party. We also have this problem of a ossified at best, semi-corrupt, if you ask me, at worst, sort of consultant class, who there's a lot more money to be made in a federal election than a state election. There's a lot more money to be made in sort of like a nationalized, whether it's ad buys or whatever it is. And so there's all these incentives incentives to not look towards the states and and lack of incentives to look towards the states.
Yeah, I don't want to get in the consultant. I never have, believe it or not, penetrated that consultant world that much. But I will simply say, there are groups, Eric Holder's is one, working with President Obama, DLCC and others that are emerging, trying to sort of make this case. And they started to make it the last couple of years. They were very helpful in our effort, for example, to deal with this gerrymandering, which we've done somewhat successfully. But these are one-off programs as opposed to the mindset of the entire effort. The heart of what the other side is doing is state houses first, get them gerrymandered, make them undemocratic. Everything flows from that power. On our side, it's still, even though some are trying, it's really late in the game. But if you look at where resources are going, to your point, it's almost entirely going to go to the multi-$100-million Senate campaigns, and then some scraps back in states, even though, by the way, smaller amounts of money goes so much further at the state level. It's state house races, it's state organizing. Karl Rove's operation in 2010 that won so many states was a $30 million budget. You're spending billions in a presidential race. And that's why I put in the book, if you took a single-digit percentage of your presidential spend and divvied it up over 4 years, and you said, we're going to invest this in democracy-supporting efforts in local races, state house races in all states, not only would you have an enormous, better chance of succeeding there, I also think you have a better chance of winning the presidential race every 4 years because you've built that infrastructure. My guess is some people hear that and think, well, that's crazy. Who would ever do that? And the answer is the Koch brothers. That's what they did. They literally said, we're going to spread our money across all states every single year. The heart of democracy is these state houses. We're going to win them, and then we're going to clinch them through gerrymandering and other law changes. It's worked like a charm for them. Win or lose federal, they are winning at the state level. We have to, whatever the consultant looks like or whatever else, we have to not have these be Eric Holder's program, someone else's program. It's got to be the mindset of the entire operation, or we'll continue to lose the battle.
And just to remind people, I think was it David Koch who was spending a tremendous amount of money as early as, like, I believe the early 1980s on the Libertarian Party. I mean, so this has been a 40-year more than multi-million dollar project for them. I mean, tens upon tens upon tens of millions of dollars, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars that they have spent. 5 or 6 years ago, we were talking about how they had created essentially a parallel party structure to the Republican Party.
Right.
And the problem is that even for the Democrats, there isn't the same incentive for any billionaire out there to do that, both because they don't have the ideological disposition, and they don't get, the Koch brothers have I think they're genuinely ideologues, but there's a return on their investment.
Right. Exactly. For them, it's an investment. It pays back multiple times over at least. But no, that's what they did. And by the way, if you read Jane Mayer's Dark Money, which I cite a number of times in my book, they also understood, it's interesting. The libertarian effort was a failure. I think David Koch ran for president and he lost. Vice president. And that's when he decided it's not going to work this way. We've got to go through the Republican Party. The other observation they made, though, and they figured out that their agenda was not popular. That agenda would never succeed in a world of a robust democracy. People, trickle-down economics, it's too much have and have not. It just doesn't work. They know it doesn't work for most people. So they figured out we're only going to get what we need to get done in a world where democracy is subverted. And they also figured out state houses are a really good place to get unpopular things passed because, again, no one's paying attention. These state house members are driven by all the worst incentives. So their state house strategy is also driven by a keen observation that almost nothing they stand for would actually do well in a world of robust democracy. So state house after state house after state house, if you want to do something really bad, a crazy gun law that only 15% of the people support, attack Roe v. Wade, which most people don't support, you do it through a state house because those state house members are so unaccountable. Not only will it pass, even if it gets struck down by court, the people who voted for it will get reelected, and they know that. So the Koch brothers really knew, and there are quotes I put in the book. They are acknowledging our agenda is really not that popular. In a real democracy, it would never happen. We must therefore go to the least democratic institutions to get it done. And by the way, we can use those institutions to keep democracy at bay more broadly, and that's what they're doing. And they say it in the open.
And if you control the federal courts, all they need to do is basically unshackle these states, and the states can they want it.
That's what they need. The reason they don't want to filibuster for judges is because that's the one thing most important. If they're leading everything through state houses, which they are, the one thing they can't afford is federal courts stopping them or federal legislation. So you apply the filibuster to stop the federal legislation, but you don't apply it for judges because you do need judges to uphold all these crazy laws that, 15, 20 years ago, most of these attacks on voting rights wouldn't even have happened because the Voting Rights Act wouldn't have allowed it. But you need federal courts to basically give a red carpet to all this crazy stuff.
Just briefly before we get into some of the ideas in which, to correct these problems, talk about the dynamic where they literally function as laboratories, like where they roll this stuff out in the state. Years ago when I was on the radio, I'd talk about some piece of legislation that was introduced in Indiana, and I distinctly remember, getting criticized, in the press for like highlighting the kook in Indiana, in the Indiana State House. And then, I don't know, 10 years later, that person is running some agency in the U.S., in the federal government, or the law is now like the law of the land in 3 states or 5 states or 10 states. Talk about that dynamic.
Sure. So obviously the title of the book is Laboratories of Autocracy, and autocracy maybe is the is the word that sticks out. But as I try to prove out in the book, they are literally functioning as laboratories. And they can do it again because they can do repeated attempts at things, as unpopular as those things are, and never lose the election because of the gerrymandering. So they can do it over and over and over again. So what you see happening is they're always learning. If something passes and it gets upheld by a court, a whole lot of other states will be doing it in a few years. If it proves to be terribly unpopular in a way that actually costs them, like in Ohio, they tried to jam through at the end of collective bargaining and they included police and fire unions in it. It was terribly unpopular. Every future attempt in other states to attack collective bargaining left out police and fire unions based upon the Ohio experience. So if something is struck down, they update the way the law is written in that state and other states so it won't get struck down again. So they're always in much more sort of around elections. They're also always seeing quickly, why did they lose an election? They saw how Obama organized in 2008. So they quickly, when they have a chance in 11, start tearing away at early vote and the opportunity to vote on Sundays and the opportunity to register and vote the same day. They go after the exact reasons they lost an election and they change the rules so they don't lose that election in the future. We're seeing that right now with drop boxes. No one ever cared about drop boxes. They've been all over a lot of states, Alaska, Utah for years. But in 20, voters of color disproportionately used them. They were a big reason Biden won in places like Wisconsin and Georgia. What do? They're targeting the way that the voters of color who don't vote for them vote. So they're always learning from each other, from themselves, from what they're watching. And by the way, they will learn from January 6th as well. Why did it not work? How do they fix it? So they really are operating as laboratories. And again, the reason they're able to is because they're so, comfortable in state houses that are rigged for them. They could just keep going over and over and over again. And since they're never held accountable, if they fail twice or 3 times or 4 times, on the 5th time, they succeed. And we've seen that in Ohio. So I start the book out with the Secretary of State here passed a rule late in the election, 1 drop box per county. And I joke that this led to traffic jams Chris Christie would be proud of, okay? All over the state, massive traffic jams. Any normal public official would say, we don't want traffic jams around voting. That's terrible. But in this world of laboratories of autocracy, what happens? A whole bunch of states see those traffic jams, understand how hard it's going to make it for certain people to vote. They pass laws all this year mimicking that rule. So in the future, they too will have congested drop boxes, early vote locations. So that's one example where they're literally learning from, I'd call, the worst practices that help their agenda.
What? Let's get to some of the 30 ideas that you give for reclaiming democracy. Is it at the state level that you perceive it as being the most important at this point?
I mean, I will say, I think we can never give up on the effort to push for the federal protection through legislation. As much as they voted last week, I mean, there is a pretty bleak history. And, one of the key analogies, and some are saying it and others are criticizing for it, but it's just a fact. The exact pattern we're seeing is the exact pattern of elements that led to Jim Crow. And I won't go through all the details, but it was the failure of the federal government to act at key moments that allowed, in the end, Jim Crow to set in. So we should never give up on the federal responsibility that the founders actually wrote in the Constitution. They guaranteed basically democratic governance in states. They said the United States guarantees a Republican form of government in states. That was the clause right before they guaranteed that states would be protected from foreign invasion. So these senators have an obligation to protect democracy in states. So that's key, and we have to keep pushing for it. But beyond that, yes, when we think about how we're politically organizing and thinking, we have to go from this federal battlefield that we often are obsessed with, that it's all about a majority in Congress and the presidency. We have to win those, of course, but we have to realize that this is no longer just, an assumption of an intact democracy where federal election is the goal of those elections, but it's actually a battle for democracy itself. And once you realize it's that, then you realize, well, the key to democracy is actually these state houses. They set the rules, they draw the districts. once you make the adjustment that this is a battle for democracy itself, which Democrats and others like-minded have not really been thinking about in those terms. That's how the Koch brothers think about it. That means you all of a sudden are changing your focus to be about states across this country, about levels of office far below Congress and Senate and presidency. You should be, building your team according to that thinking, spending your resources, organizing in a permanent way, or like they are doing. And if you simply keep playing this every couple year federal game while they're doing everything else, well, obviously they're gonna win. So there needs to be a major adjustment politically, and almost every other step flows from changing that sort of framework of what the battle looks like.
But isn't the problem? I don't know what the solution is for this, but it's one thing to say, like the Koch brothers,
right?
Two guys, one is dead now.
Right.
But two guys sit around with a couple of their whatever their brain trust is, and contemplate this, or maybe they, Karl Rove contacts them and says, I need the bankrolling. Here's my idea, and it's a completely top-down process, and for them to contemplate an electoral strategy that is really just about process, right? I mean, because at the end of the day, they're like, we don't need to push this type of legislation first. That flows if we set up a system like this, and we set up a process like that. There is no analog to the Koch brothers. Yeah. And so how does that happen? Because we're not going to have 1 million Democratic voters, let's say, or just voters who are going to say, well, I know to send my $5 check to this guy who's running for state auditor in Ohio. That's, I mean, to a certain extent, we had some of that in 2016 in response. There were groups that were sort of like self-organizing and doing that, but I don't know how sustainable that is.
Yeah, I mean, you do need, so my book was sort of intended for many audiences, and you do need some large players to come around and say, who have resource, and say, we are gonna try and lead at a high level, an equivalent of what the other side has done, and fund it accordingly. You also, though, need, as I put in the book, this is not just for the Senate or those high value people who can put money behind something big. There's also an adjustment that everyone else can make that I put in the book. But yeah, I agree that the forces on the right have essentially privatized a lot of sort of the party process, and they just do what they want to do. And there isn't the equivalent here. And if there are major people involved, which there are, each of them does their own thing. It's not like there's a coordinated effort. I do think that's one of the reasons why one side is doing it better than the other. I think major players have to figure out that democracy itself is at stake and be planning accordingly. And, to the extent my book gets in their hands, I hope they read it. Because when I say in my book, take some part of what's given to the presidential election and divide it up over 4 years and invest it in a broader state strategy, that's who I'm trying to talk to. Right. And if they don't figure it out, you're right. It will be very hard at that level to do it. But I will say in the book, though, for everyone who isn't a billionaire or a U.S. senator, there are many things that any individual can do, whether you're the mayor, whether you're just a grassroots activist, which is the heart of all of it, whether you're on a homeless shelter board. One of the things I put in the book is sort of a challenge that I myself, undertook by doing the book. Every single person has a footprint in the world. And every person, I hope, even though we're almost done with January, will make a resolution for the new year that they will use their footprint in any way that they can think of to lift democracy. And just a few examples of this. There is no reason, in a state like Ohio, every city, the voters of these cities, our large urban cities, are the ones being purged by horrible purging processes. Every mayor should take offense that their citizens are being purged in this democracy, and should every aspect of city government that interfaces with those voters should be registering right now. Rec centers, health clinics, you name it, the libraries. If you're on the board of a food bank, are you registering your constituents when they come to the food bank? Because we know the other side is purging them. Public housing, public transportation. The one thing we can all do is figure out and not just registering, but engaging in our little neck of the world. What can all of us do? Because I worry the model we have is too much waiting for Stacey Abrams to save us with some nonprofit that register voters, or Michelle Obama. Those are great efforts, one-off efforts to register. But how we'll really do better is if we literally put in the bloodstream of what we all do every day. You run a restaurant, you run a barbershop. Are you registering the people who are your valued customers who are being purged? So my hope is beyond the big people and the big shots and what they do. And again, it's just one book, but I hope other people talk the same way. Everyone can start to push back, put their money where democracy is, subscribe to your local or state paper that covers this stuff. Figure out who your state house candidate is or who's opposing a bad one. Everyone needs to start paying attention to this if we're going to fight back. And so much of the reason why we're losing in this broader fight for democracy is one side is very focused on undermining it. And everyone else who I think cares about it is taking it for granted or not paying enough attention to realize there's a fight taking place and they need to get in it.
David Pepper. Book is Laboratories of Autocracy, a wake-up call from behind the lines. We'll put a link to that at majority.fm. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Take care.
Bye-bye. All right, folks. Now, I neglected to do this up front, and I apologize. And I've been saving this email for a week.
Oh.
I know you got to get going. Just give me one second.
Yeah. No, it's okay.
At the beginning of last Wednesday, we talked about, I suggested that you had coined the term hump day.
Mm-hmm.
We got an email from listener Scott. Dear Emma, as a boomer, I've known about the phrase hump day all my life.
Do you know
Here's a link.
Immortal or not?
Here's a link documenting that has been common for 70 years. So I have some bad news for you. You did not coin the term hump day.
Oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that, but you don't know how old I am, and until you independently verify it, you still cannot say I didn't come up with it.
There you go. All right. Emma's going to step out, although she may come back soon.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay.
Pass your time.
And in the meantime, I'm going to head into the fun half of the program. Just a reminder, it's your support that keeps this program going. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code MAJORITY, get 10% off. Matt, what's happening in the Matt Leckian media universe?
Yeah, two guests tonight. We're having Marshall Steinbaum from the University of Utah on to talk about how actually getting forgiving student loan debt would not be regressive, as a Brookings Institution elites like to tell you. And also we'll have Bob Leibel. He's running for Travis County commissioner. And so David Griscom has an interview with him. We're talking about local politics. So patreon.com/left reckoning for that stuff tonight. We're also going to talk about the Jordan Peterson climate thing.
Oh, yeah, shoot. We didn't get to that. Maybe we'll get to it later. But when we come back, got a little break in format. Got somebody who wanted to debate me. When we come back, we will have that. Be right back after this.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Denner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Denner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males.
Psych. Fuck them. Fuck them. Oh. Snowflake says what? What? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100.
Can't knock the hustle.
Come on. Fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy. I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
Which is not true. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. It is the fun half. Generally, we take phone calls and take IMs. We will take IMs. Hopefully, we'll have a little term, but we have a break in format today. About 2 weeks ago, I think it was, I got IM'd. We take IMs every day, as you know. I got IM'd that a guy named Jackson Hinkle wanted to debate me. And so we have a fairly open door policy here. People can call in at any time. I suggested that he could call in, or if he wanted to debate me, he could email at majorityreporters@gmail.com or tweet at me. And within an hour after the show was over, that segment was clipped, I think, by Jackson, and he wanted to, and he said to debate. And so we set it up. And since that time, Bradley, put up that thing that you just gave me. Over that time, he has been very excited to debate. Those are, I think, from Twitter over the past week. Yes. Oh, please bring them on. So I want to welcome to the program Jackson Hinkle. Do we have him?
Yeah, give me 1 second here. Let me start my camera.
Okay. And so, Jackson, thank you for coming on today. I should say also, you were very gracious because where can I get him up here on the screen? Do we have him? Yeah, he's on. I've got a weird thing on my stand. Oh, there we go. Okay. So you sent me an email with some dates, and I've got some I'm a little jammed up with my kids in the month of February, so I invited you onto the program. You were very gracious about coming on, and I appreciate that. And you wanted to, and now is it the case, Bradley? You can take that down. I was told that you are a communist, and so I don't know what you got going there. And so I was told that you are a communist, and that you wanted to come on, and you emailed me that you wanted to debate. This is what you wrote: "Would love to focus the discussion around your support for the Squad. I personally believe the Squad and progressives in Congress are sellouts who have abandoned virtually every aspect of progressive principles over the last couple of years. Let me know if you'd be down to discuss this. And I was a little surprised. Are you all right? Can you see the...
Yeah, the thing just moved, so I got to fix it.
Okay, there you go. All right. So, so let me just, so that my audience can know who you are. You've got a show called The Dive, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And are you, and you are a communist, yes?
I'm a Marxist-Leninist, anti-imperialist, and American patriot.
Okay. All right. And because I have to say, I was a little bit surprised by what you wanted to talk about as a Marxist-Leninist, I guess. But because it seems a little bit focused on electoral politics, from my experience with folks who refer to themselves as communists. But if that's what you wanted to do, that's fine with me. So let's just start with the idea of the premise that the Squad and progressives in Congress, presumably the Democrats, right, are sellouts. What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that, and why I think they're not progressive, because that's the other big thing here, is I think that there's 3 or 4 major issues I have with them. Number one being that they could have blocked the passage of a large number of must-pass bills, and they chose not to. And if they had chosen to block those, I think they could have, leveraged their power for concessions, policy concessions. The second thing is I think that they have been directly voting for anti-progressive bills and measures. In some cases, they've even introduced these themselves. They've acted at the behest of the Democratic establishment on multiple occasions, giving their own, campaign funds to corporate Democrats. And the fourth thing, or the third or fourth thing, is basically staying silent and giving Joe Biden support in the face of his pro-war, anti-worker agenda.
Okay. So let me ask you this, because I'm trying to get at, we'll get to those, the specific things, but when you say sellout, this is the part that I'm unclear on. What do you think they've gotten from this? Like when you sell out something, right? What are they getting?
I think they're getting preferential treatment from the Democratic establishment. I think the Democratic establishment is playing softball politics with them rather than going as hard as they could against the Squad. I think the media has treated them relatively favorably ever since they have started to act in line and kind of toe the line of the Democratic establishment. They've been able to receive donations and connections with George Soros and George Soros's family for not only their campaigns, but associated ventures like the Sunrise Movement. So I think those are just a few of the ways that they have
gotten preferential treatment from the Democratic establishment. In what way? Because as far as I can tell, like, for instance, AOC, Katie Porter's not exactly in the Squad, but I imagine you include her in this group. They got actually the opposite of preferential treatments when it came to committee positions. Committees are the most important thing in terms of exercising power. They literally censured Ilhan Omar. They attempted to do it almost.
I think in some regards they have been attacked, and there is going to be that friction there. But in some ways, Sam, because you're trying to act like there's no ways that they've been treated preferentially.
Just tell me.
They were invited to create dialogue with the Biden administration on a whole host of policies and different policy arenas to influence the Biden agenda. Although I don't think they've really done that, with the exception of maybe climate change. They've also, Ilhan Omar, for example, was made whip of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. We also have Ilhan Omar introducing bills that have already passed the House, thanks in part to Nancy Pelosi's support. So there's a lot of ways in which they have received preferential treatment. But what I want to get at is what they have supported.
Let me just, let's just have a dialogue here. You say they get preferential treatment. I'm trying to figure out what it is that they're sold out for. Like, what did they get paid in? And you said preferential treatment from the establishment. I listed things where they got the opposite, but you're telling me that Ilhan Omar is named the whip of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and they had the opportunity to negotiate with the Biden administration. That's the preferential treatment they got over other members of Congress?
Well, I mean, the de facto position for progressives would be for the Democratic establishment to roast them at the stake every single opportunity they get, because they're there to directly, supposedly, challenge the Democratic establishment, replace them with people who align with, whatever the squad is, the Justice Democrats were supposed to be. So, yes, I mean, that is the goal here. And it would make sense that the Democratic establishment should be trying to go as hard as they can against them at every single chance they get. And they haven't done that. They've given them preferential treatment to what you would expect from a group of individuals who are supposed to be unseating them.
So you're saying that the Biden administration actually conceded on all of those things, as opposed to, I mean, I don't know what you mean by roasting.
I don't think they conceded. I don't want to focus too long on this because this isn't the crux of the argument. The crux of the argument, what I emailed you, was about your support for the squad when I think that they are not progressive. Okay. But yes, the Biden administration.
I'm just trying to. But listen, we're just going back and forth here. All right, you've made your assessment that they're getting preferential treatment because they're not being roasted by the establishment. And then you're saying that they're getting money from George Soros?
Yes.
In the form of giving it to the Sunrise Movement?
No, Ilhan Omar received direct contributions.
How much from George Soros?
She received, let me pull it up here. She received between George Soros, Andrea Soros, and Alex Soros, she received $2,700, $5,600 in 2020, and then in 2018, $2,700 respectively.
Okay. All right. I didn't realize she had received $2,700 in multiple years. And so you're contending that they sold out for over $2,700 from George Soros.
No, if you listen to anything I just said, I named numerous examples in which the squad has been given preferential treatment. To just select that one in particular is very disingenuous.
No, well, you said Soros. So I was just asking in terms of the Soros part. You said Soros was number 4, I think.
I mean, there's more I could go on to list, but again, what I want to talk about here, and what you seem to not want to talk about, and I can assume why, is your continued support for the squad, who is going along with the Democratic establishment on all these votes they could be blocking to get concessions in return. And in some cases, they're actually directly supporting anti-progressive measures and bills.
Okay, and I there is no doubt that they have taken votes that I agree that I would disagree with in some instances.
A few or a lot?
I mean, a few.
How many is a few? I'm just curious.
I don't have a list of how many votes I don't appreciate that they've taken.
Well, I mean, don't you think there's I just want to nail you down on this, because don't you think there's a difference between, like, say a few is 2 to 3. Don't you think there's a difference between 2 to 3 bad votes and say like 15 or 20 bad votes?
How many votes did they take in total? And I'll tell you that I would imagine there's probably 25 to 30% of their votes that I would have a problem with off the top of my head.
I would imagine for consequential policy items, there was probably roughly like 60 to 100 consequential policy items that were voted on in this session of Congress 2021 so far. There's obviously a lot of procedural and House rules votes that get voted on every single session of Congress. So far, there's been over 400 votes in this session of Congress, but a lot of those, again, are just on amendments to bills that are eventually voted on or just procedural votes.
Okay.
So you're saying that maybe 20 to 30 out of 60 are bad votes?
30%. I don't know. I mean,
well, you just said 20 to 30 votes out of potentially 60 to 100 were bad. So is that something that you would necessarily support? I mean, I just don't really understand. Why don't you criticize the squad on all of these things? I've heard you criticize them like once and every so often, but you don't criticize them on all of these bad votes. And I don't understand how you plan to hold them accountable if you're not criticizing them.
Well, I mean, I do. I mean, I don't know if you watch every one of our shows.
Did you criticize them? Did you criticize them when AOC funneled $160,000 to DCCC corporate Democrats after promising not to?
Actually, first of all, I actually didn't criticize that.
Why not?
Actually, I'll tell you why. Because I think part of the strategy in which they deployed, and she said, we should say that she did these in incremental ones, right? There was like 2,000s a pop, if I'm not mistaken, right?
They were 5,000.
Okay, 5,000. I think there's value in doing that because I think that what politicians should do, broadly speaking, is go in and try and get legislation that is positive passed. And so if
what positive legislation have they gotten passed by donating to those DCCC candidates?
Well, the Build Back Better bill passed in the House.
Did it pass in the Senate?
No, but she didn't give to senators.
So what legislation has the squad voted for, and it's also passed in the Senate, that you think is good and directly resulted in them donating $5,000 to DCCC candidates? Don't you also think, wait, Sam, don't you also think that given that AOC specifically said that she was not going to donate to them, that's a problem, that she then went out and donated to them? And this is before
that. I think people could take issue with that.
And this is before there's even a Democratic primary. So there was going to be progressive challengers like Ava Patsova in Arizona's first district.
Listen, I think people could take issue with that.
So why did you not?
We did talk about it.
You just told me you didn't talk about it a minute ago.
No.
Yes, you did.
I didn't spend as much time emphasizing it apparently as you want me to, but I've just
you just told me a minute ago you didn't talk about it. What do you think about the fact that they voted to subsidize Cobra premiums for 6 months?
I, in fact, talked about it with AOC, and I said that was garbage, and she said it was garbage.
So you talked about it before she did it or after she did it?
After she did it, she came on the show, and I literally said that was a garbage vote, and she said, yes, it's garbage.
So did you press her as to why? I'm just curious.
Yes. You should go back and watch it.
What about when she voted to sanction Myanmar, Cambodia, and supported sanctions on Cuba, Venezuela, a handful of other countries she voted to sanction, and basically the entire global South?
Yeah, I'm against sanctioning in particular the case of Venezuela.
Okay. What about when she refused to speak out against Biden's airstrikes in Syria, Afghanistan, Somalia, or Iraq, many of which killed civilians?
I don't remember if I said anything about AOC not.
You didn't. I was watching your show at the time. I actually watch a lot of your show, but usually to criticize you. What about when she voted to increase the Capitol Police and security budget to $1.9 billion increase?
I didn't take issue with her specifically, but I said that vote was wrong.
So
really care.
Okay, Sam, there's one more thing I want to say here, because this kind of ties the whole argument together. There's a difference between saying that this vote is wrong and saying that not only is this vote wrong, but they could have leveraged the power that they had on these votes, because in the case of the Capitol Police and security bill, they could have actually blocked the passage of that bill to get concessions in return. So why are you not saying that? Because you've actually gone out on the record previously, and you have said,
Jackson, let's have a debate here, okay? You're listing off every single time I haven't criticized AOC over the past.
Well, the question is why?
Childish. Well, I've made it quite clear. I don't care.
You don't care about what?
Let me ask you this.
You don't care about what? No. What don't you care about? What don't you care about?
Increase in the Capitol Police, I don't think is that relevant.
Why don't you think it's relevant? There was a leak yesterday from Capitol Police that shows that Capitol Police has intelligence units across the country that are creating dossiers on Congress people and their staffers. You don't care about that?
I think that's a problem. That came out yesterday.
Yes.
The increase in the Capitol Police after they were overrun, you know what? I just don't think it's that big of a deal. What I think is a much bigger deal in my mind was the opportunity to raise millions of children out of poverty, which they're not going to be able to do, but because, like you say,
because they let it lapse.
No, they didn't let it lapse.
The child tax credit, they let that lapse. And they could have potentially blocked that from lapsing had they leveraged their vote. Had they leveraged their vote.
What are you talking about?
I'm talking about a number of votes. Do you understand the idea? Do you understand the idea of force the vote? Sam, do you understand the idea of force the vote?
No, I don't. But let's just stay.
What do you mean you don't understand the idea of force the vote?
I'm Jackson. Do you think AOC is better than Joe Manchin?
You don't understand the idea of force the vote?
Do you think AOC is better than Joe Manchin? Let's stay with your original thing that you wanted to debate. Then we can get to.
Is that what I wanted to debate? Did I email you about that?
Would love to focus the discussion around your support for the squad. I personally believe the squad and progressives in Congress are sellouts who have abandoned virtually every aspect of progressive principles over the last couple of years.
So where in that did I say that AOC is worse than Joe Manchin? I'm just curious.
I'm asking you. I'm trying to explore if they have sold out every aspect of progressive principles, and if you think Joe Manchin and AOC are essentially the same.
Again, I did not say that.
I didn't say you said that. That's why I'm asking you.
You're creating a fake argument. Of course, no, I don't think AOC is the same.
Anything. I'm asking you a question.
Well, no, you said that I said that, and that's what I initially came here to debate. That's not true. But no, of course, I don't think. Of course, Sam. Of course, I don't think that AOC is the same as Joe Manchin. Like, you think I'm insane or something? Of course, I don't think they're the same.
I have some questions. So
I have some questions about you too.
AOC is a better legislator, is more progressive than Joe Manchin?
I think she's a terrible legislator because she's allowed roughly 18 must-pass or near must-pass votes go through without blocking them in instances in which she could have actually blocked the agenda from going through.
Okay. Do you think AOC is more progressive than Joe Manchin?
That's not what I came here to debate, but of course, yes, I do.
You why I support.
That's not what I came here to debate, but of course I do. Yeah.
Okay. So the reason why I support the squad is because I think she's better than people like Joe Manchin. The squad.
So
think that
my problem with that,
Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and are better than Josh Gottheimer.
So you're basically saying, well, AOC is better than the lowest bar we have in the Democratic Party, so that's why I support her. By that logic, do you support Nancy Pelosi because Nancy Pelosi is better than Joe Manchin?
You know what? I don't support Nancy Pelosi because
really? But she's better than Joe Manchin, so why don't you support her?
Because she's not the best that we have in the Congress.
Okay, so let's take a look at the best we have in the Congress. The best we have in the Congress are, according to your logic, the best we have in the Congress right now is the squad, right? And the most progressive, I'm putting that in quotes, members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus.
Yes, exactly.
So given the fact that this group of individuals, the squad, campaigned on fighting for a set agenda, and they have not fought for that agenda, and they have abandoned every single opportunity that they could have blocked must-pass bills through or must-pass votes like the speakership vote during the Force the Vote saga. They have chosen to pass the Democratic agenda instead of actually forcing through their agenda and getting small or large concessions in return.
Okay. So
why didn't you support Force the Vote?
Well, I'll talk to you about Force the Vote, but let's just stay on the topic that you wanted, and then I'll talk about Force the Vote. The reason why I support the most progressive members of the Democratic Party is because they're the most progressive members of the Democratic Party. Now, if you want to have a conversation that you think people should be voting for a third party instead of Democrats, I'll have that conversation too. But why wouldn't, and unless you do want to have that conversation, why wouldn't I support the most progressive members of the Democratic Party, even if they are subpar to where I want them to be?
I think that you need to hold them accountable, which is, I was a supporter of AOC. I donated to her. I bought her little merchandise stuff. And even during Force the Vote, even during Force the Vote, I would always say, I hope she proves me wrong. I hope she fights for this agenda that I care about. And she never did. And the squad never did. And they have chosen to vote for the party line every single time and not fight for their agenda.
You feel scorned by them, but you still think they're the most progressive members of Congress, correct?
That's not a high bar. I hold them to what they. No, Sam, listen. Don't interrupt. I was about to answer your question and you interrupted me. I was about to answer your question and you interrupted me.
Okay.
I hold them to the bar that they ran on while, campaigning for Congress. That bar is saying stuff like, I'm going to fight for Medicare for all. We can't wait 100 more years. We need to fight for it right now. Saying stuff like, I don't care if I'm a one-term congressperson. AOC said this. I don't care if I'm a one-term congressperson. I'm going to fight for my agenda or essentially go down trying. That's what I hold them to.
Okay.
Why don't you?
I mean, I have issues with votes that they have taken at times. They are the most progressive members of the Democratic Party. And until there's more progressive, people who are more progressive than them, they're the best we have. I don't get attached to politicians like you seem to have felt like you're scorned by them in some way. And I just don't care. I don't think politicians have principles. I think they go in and they get the best that they can do. Sometimes I think that they make mistakes because they're not smart. Sometimes I think some of them are just completely sold out. I think there's a lot of sellouts in Congress. In fact, Ilhan Omar was on the program last week, and she specifically said there's a lot of people who came in progressive who are corporatists now. And I don't know who exactly she meant. I have some ideas. I suspect Nancy Pelosi was one of them. And so I don't get attached in the way you do. So your notion of my support for them, I didn't donate to AOC. I didn't get as attached to them as you did. I take them. They are politicians. I look for the most progressive politicians who are in a position to either win or to implement policy. And yes, they have largely failed. Joe Biden has failed. The Senate has failed. The Senate leadership has failed. I think Pelosi failed. I think it was a mistake for them to vote for the bipartisan infrastructure bill. The Progressive Caucus has failed. In fact, I think that, one of the things that I am hoping, and, to the extent that I can pressure, there's only so much pressure I can bring to bear on politicians. But one of the things I am hoping that they do is that they actually implement some voting requirements, some litmus tests to be a Progressive Caucus member.
I think that's a great idea. But Sam, first of all, you just said a lot there.
So that idea? You know who brought up that idea on this program?
I have brought up that you've brought that idea up on this program. I brought it up on my program as well. I know you've said that
up on this program.
You said it during your first Force the Vote video. Actually, you said that maybe it's time that we tell members of the CPC that they should have to support a vote on Medicare for all on the House floor if they want to be a part of it. I think that's a great idea. I just wish you would continue holding them accountable like you did then. Anyways, but you said that I'm too.
How did I hold them accountable then?
Sam, I just let you talk for so long.
How did I hold them accountable then?
You want to go into this,
Jackson? What do you think is going on here?
You held them accountable back then by going out on your program and saying stuff like
honestly,
stuff like
is influencing them.
We could push House progressive members to leverage their votes. It is worth it right now, tweeting at some of the top progressives, people who are supported by the Justice Democrats in the squad. The more of a stink we make, the easier it is for progressives to leverage it because they can simply say, look, I have my own pressures. So I think it's a good idea to do this, to force this vote.
Yeah.
So why did you not say that or make a stink about this during the vote on the adoption of House rules or the congressional budget or the American Rescue Plan Act or the For the People Act or increasing the Capitol Police and Security budget or the 12% increase in the State Department? No, I'm not done. 12% increase in the State Department and USAID funding that they all voted for. The Legislative Appropriations Act, Combating International Islamophobia Act, all of these things, the Infrastructure Act, increasing government funding, all of these things, Sam, I'm done, but let me just finish. I let you talk for so long and I don't interrupt you. I just expect a little bit of respect in return. All of these things were passed by a margin of roughly 6 to 10 votes in the House. These are all things that the progressives could have banded together, or in some cases banded together to stop and get concessions in return.
Jackson,
Sam, please stop interrupting me.
No.
Stop interrupting me.
Jackson, you listed off a bunch of votes that you presume I'm against.
No.
I have a problem with the State Department getting more funding.
No, you don't have a problem with that?
With the State Department getting funding? No.
A 12% increase.
I mean, a 12% increase, 11% increase, 13% increase.
You don't have a problem with the State Department, who is, leading coups across this world, who is launching hybrid warfare through the National Endowment for Democracy in countries all across this world, like Venezuela, like you just mentioned, that you said you had a problem with warmongering and sanctions on Venezuela. You don't have a problem with the 12% increase to the State Department when they could be getting concessions for progressive policies in return?
What concession?
Any concession.
Well,
do you know how closely that State Department vote passed? Do you even know the vote?
No.
It was 217 to 212. AOC, Tlaib, and Bush voted no. Presley, Omar, Bowman, Jayapal, Khanna, Lee, and Porter voted yes. So had three more progressives who voted yes, voted no, they would have been able to defeat the measure temporarily or, forever, because I don't support an increase in the State Department, unlike you. Okay. And they could have blocked it temporarily and gotten concessions in return.
Increased on the State Department budget.
So why don't you think it was a good idea to at least temporarily delay the passage of that to get concessions?
What I had more of an issue with was the...
No, wait, I want to hear you answer that.
Authorization. I don't care, Jackson. I don't care. I do not share your concern about the 12% increase in the State Department budget. I'm far more.
I'm not asking you to care about that. I'm asking you to care about the fact that they could have delayed that. They chose not to. And by choosing not to, they abandoned an opportunity to get a progressive concession in return. Why didn't you?
Concession are you talking about?
Any progressive concession. You've listed things like getting better committee assignments.
Wait. So you think they're going to get a better committee assignment if they hold up the vote on a State Department budget?
That's what you've said in the past regarding the speakership vote. I think there's other progressive concessions they could have gotten in return. I think, they could have gotten votes on given policies. I think they could have gotten Biden's agenda potentially.
One to me. What
about Sam, listen, what about a $15 minimum wage for all Americans? That's not even a progressive agenda item. That's something Biden ran on.
Minimum wage.
Yes.
Not get through the Senate, Jackson.
But don't you think it would be important to at the least get a vote on that in the House?
I mean, I suppose. I think everybody has said they're for it. It's not going anywhere.
So why don't you support the squad delaying these bills, all the ones I just listed that passed by a small margin of votes, smaller than the squad themselves?
Things are not terribly relevant in the final analysis. I mean, one of the problems with, let's say, force the vote, and you wanted to talk about that, and you've quoted me from a video in which I initially talked about force the vote. Do we have that video? Play that video. Play a clip of that video, and I'm gonna tell you like what exactly what happened with force.
You need to look at the video to remember what you said.
It was a year ago, Jackson.
I guess your opinions have shifted a lot since then.
Well, I've also done 300 shows since then. All right, here's the video. My only caveat about this is that I don't know how well it's going to do in a vote. I think it's going to get the majority of Democrats, I would imagine, if it was to take the vote taken. But it's also like, is that the best ask? Mm-hmm. Is it better ask? We want more progressives on this committee, or we want more progressives on that committee. But for the time being, and I need to read more into it, but I think the idea is that it is worth, right now, I think, this is one of those few places like where Twitter actually means something. All right. So now, Jackson, let me tell you what happened after that.
Can you hear me? My camera froze for some reason. You can hear me though?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
So let me tell you what happened at that point. I was talking to some people, and nobody in a congressional thing, but activists on this, and people who are involved in Medicare for All were like, it's going to be bad. We're going to lose 300 plus to 100. It's going to be bad for Medicare for All. And I was like, well, at this point, it's quite clear that the campaign for force the vote had already basically taken off. And at that point, do we just lose them?
No, I'm still here. My camera just went out. I don't know what happened.
Is that on your end? Because I could actually see me in your camera.
Yeah, no, it must be his.
It's on my end.
Anyways, all right. So, and at that point, I realized, like, okay, well, I'm not going to stay in the way of this thing because let 1,000 flowers bloom was my feeling. It was a dumb ask to have a vote. I'm now watching myself 4 times 4. It was a dumb ask, in my opinion, to have a vote for something that was going to lose. And I think that we definitely saw the failure, even if it had won. I think it would, and it wouldn't have gone anywhere in the Senate. But for it to lose so badly would have been a dumb thing to do. And then all of a sudden it became this sort of litmus test. If the squad is not using this to do a dumb performative act, then they're sellouts. And that was the only time that I actually even started to speak out against the force of the vote. I'm not even sure if I did, I think maybe we talked about it once at that point. And the next time I talked about it was on a show I was invited on, which at the time I was invited on was called, what was it, like putting force the vote to bed, I think it was. By the time I ended that show, it had been a debate, but that was weeks after it had failed. So the reason why I didn't hold them to getting committee positions with that vote at that point was because the whole thing had taken off as Medicare for All and had become, someone's sort of pet project to make it about some type of litmus test for the squad to push for Medicare for All, which I thought was a really bad idea.
All right. Well, what's interesting about that putting force the vote to bed debate? I don't know if you still believe this, but one of the reasons you put forward for not supporting force the vote was you said, let's say Nancy Pelosi says, fine, don't vote for me. The Dems lose the speakership because you're not going to get that 218 people to coalesce around another person. You're going to end up getting McCarthy. Do you still believe the lie that Kevin McCarthy would have become Speaker of the House if we tried to force the vote?
I have no idea what would have happened, to be totally honest with you, because there was no other candidate to run for Speaker of the House.
But you do understand it would have taken Democrats voting for Kevin McCarthy or a large number of people abstaining from voting altogether rather than voting for someone else to end up with Kevin McCarthy as Speaker?
Well, I don't know. Let's say they held out. What happens on day 2 or 3?
You keep taking more rounds of voting.
Do people abstain?
No, you keep taking more rounds of voting.
How do you know Josh Gottheimer doesn't abstain? How do you know Henry Cuellar?
There's historical precedent for this.
Well, there's historical precedent for what? Henry Cuellar?
For a House speakership vote that went 12 rounds.
Yeah, well, how do you know that Josh Gottheimer is not going to abstain? How do you know that Henry Cuellar is not going to abstain?
Because that would mean a Democrat is voting for a Republican. That's not going to happen.
Have you seen Henry Cuellar's voting record?
I have, and I've seen AOC's, which falls pretty much all in line with Nancy Pelosi's too.
Right. Well, Henry Cuellar's doesn't.
The fact of the matter is they were not going to vote for a Republican. The Democratic establishment would not have allowed that to happen. And the fact that you're thinking that there's some sort of the fact that you're thinking that there's some sort of practicality in this argument that Henry Cuellar or Gottheimer would have voted for Kevin McCarthy as Speaker is actually insane. Like, that's actually insane.
Okay.
So if you understand, though, the principle behind force the vote, and maybe you have problems with the Medicare.
I had a problem with the ask.
Jesus Christ, Sam, let me finish before you interrupt me.
Leverage.
I know my camera's not on, it broke, but like, let me at least finish what I'm saying.
Okay.
If you understand that force the vote is a strategy that could be carried out, and you've said this in the past, you just think maybe Medicare for all wasn't the best ask, or the speakership vote was too risky because you don't understand how a speakership vote works, then why didn't you support forcing the vote on any of the other policies I listed, or criticize the squad for not forcing the vote on those policies?
Okay, let's not use the word force the vote, because
what do you want to call it?
Why didn't they use their leverage?
I know that phrase is triggering to you. So why didn't they use their leverage?
Why didn't they use their leverage? Now, how do you know that they didn't?
Because they voted for these bills without getting concessions in return.
How do you know?
Because there are no substantive large material changes that we have seen. There's nothing that the squad has been able.
No, wait a second. You just made a statement.
You just asked me a question. Let me finish.
You asked me a question. Let me finish. You said there's no.
You just asked me a question. Do you want me to finish answering or not?
Do you know what's in the Build Back Better bill? Do you know what's in the Build Back Better bill?
The one that didn't pass?
Yeah, no, the one that did pass. It passed in the House.
Was it signed into law? I must have missed that.
But Jackson, we're talking about House members, yes?
Well, what is the point of...
Are we talking about House members, or are we talking about people in the Senate?
What is the point?
Are we talking about Joe Manchin, or are we talking about AOC? You said that Joe Manchin is worse than AOC, that AOC is more progressive. They're different people. They're two different houses. You understand how that works.
You want to hear the incredible thing, Sam? You want to hear I understand that there are two separate chambers in Congress, Sam. You want to hear the incredible thing?
Hold on for 1 second, Jackson.
You to talk over. You haven't ever let me answer the initial question you asked. Let me say this.
Let me play
this. Interesting thing here.
Hold on 1 second, Jackson. Give me 1 second. Will you play the end of this, the Ilhan Omar thing? Because I thought this was sort of interesting, because I think it's possible that Jackson doesn't quite understand certain dynamics. Bradley, do you have that? Play this last clip, because I tuned into this, or I got to be fair. Somebody sent this to me, and I was curious because Jackson had done a video on our interview with Ilhan Omar and said it was shocking. And I was like, was it? Did we do something that was shocking in the interview? But play the end of this, and this is what I think it was. Fight's a little bit of ways away, so we can hopefully catch.
The leadership fight's not going to happen, dude. What are you saying? You honestly believe Ilhan Omar's like, this motherfucker thinks that we're going to hold the House? Oh my God. Okay, yeah, sure. You ask me those leadership position questions when the time comes around. Okay. All right. We'll see you later. Okay. That was incredible.
Okay. So, Jackson, you understand there is going to be a leadership fight regardless of whether the Democrats hold the House. That there is a leadership fight. If they are in the majority, then it's for the speakership. And if they're in the minority, then it's just for the leadership. In other words, Kevin McCarthy is the leader of the Republicans in the minority. You understand how this works, right?
So first of all, I do want to address the fact that you just completely changed the subject when you were getting press. But yes,
no, I didn't change the subject. You don't think, like, you expect 6 members of the squad to change the votes in the Senate, and it doesn't work that way.
When did I ever say that, Sam?
Well, because you said, what concessions did they get? And I said they passed the Build Back Better bill, which you didn't seem to understand, in the House. And they did pass it in the House. And then you said, well, it wasn't signed into legislation. And I said, that's because it got stopped in the Senate.
Okay.
And 6 members of the House cannot control.
I'm trying to be really respectful right now, but you continue to talk over me and interrupt me. Let me go. Let me go. So when you talk about speakership votes, that implies that there's going to be a Democratic majority.
I spoke about leadership votes.
Second of all,
leadership votes.
Second of all,
play it again. He didn't hear it.
Second of all,
play it again. Hold on,
I'm going to mute you if you play it again. I'm trying to talk about.
It's my show, ding dong.
Okay, well, I'm going to go off and say what I'm going to say about what I've been trying to get out for 5 minutes now, but you've continued.
Well, you can do it again, but you just misspoke. You said I said speakership, and I said leadership. So let's play it again.
You think that even if the end of that conversation, the end of the conversation was about leadership, and it was, do you think that's not going to happen, dude? What are you saying? You honestly believe Ilhan Omar's like, this motherfucker thinks that we're going to hold the House? Oh my God. Okay.
I didn't say that.
Okay, yeah, sure. You ask me those leadership position questions when the time comes around. Okay. All right.
Okay. So, all right. So, Jackson, continue.
You'll have to unmute yourself, Jackson.
Is he still muted? He may not come back.
Ask him to unmute a few more times.
Do you want to unmute?
It might be the complex setup he's got going on there.
He's got a pretty crazy setup going on. All I do is see myself twice. Did he go away?
All
right, well, Jackson, if you want to come back, you can come back. If not, we can say goodbye. Or we can keep him on if we want.
Yeah, I'll just keep him in this side.
Oh, am I still on his screen?
Yeah, you are.
Okay. Do number, what's this one? Do this one. Put that up. See if that gets him to come back. This is a, this is the thing, is sometimes I think Jackson's maybe not as necessarily as truthful. He says, lies my parents told me when I was little. This is just from like I guess it's from a year ago. Santa is real. The tooth fairy leaves money under your pillow. The United States military is fighting wars to defend our country. And then his dad responded, this is the only way that I knew him before this whole thing. I'm Santa. You never complained when you got the gifts. Yes, we were such assholes sneaking you money under your pillow. Never once did your mother and I tell you the military is fighting wars to defend our country. That's a bold-faced lie on your part. Did Jackson leave?
Yeah,
he's gone. All right. That's too bad. Because I wanted to ask him about that, because as a parent, I wanted to know if there's actually tension between them or if that was funny, because I feel like I would do that to my kids at one point. But all right, let's take a break, and we'll come back and wrap up the show, and maybe Emma's just come back in so we can do this show. I don't think he wants to come back.
No, I think that. Well, I mean, I think we'll put it down to the technical confusion that he had going on there.
Yeah.
Maybe it was difficult to unmute, but yeah, I think we got all the points covered.
I think so.
We didn't get to the squad is the spear point of fascism in the United States, but maybe I can.
Do you want to give him that opportunity to say that? We should allow. Let's play that.
Yeah. Well, which part? Do we have the squad is the fascism? Yeah.
It's not just that they're worse, that they're better than Manchin, but they're also the vanguard of fascism in this country. See, this is the thing that I think was like a little bit disingenuous.
I feel like there's a little bit of Mott and Bailey, if people want to look that up, debating term, where you take a stronger position in one time, then a more defensible position when you're being called on it. But here's a little bit on the squad.
Are Democrats the new fascists with their COVID concentration camps? I think that, as I've said before, and I literally got, it went semi-viral on Twitter when I said it, but I stand by it 100%. I said that fascism in the United States will come from progressive, like woke circles, like the Squad, for example. I truly believe this is just further proof of that. You know, this is just further proof of that. So, yeah, I think, yeah.
So it's not just that they didn't leverage their vote to get progressive concessions when there was a 12% increase in the State Department budget. It's that they're the vanguard of fascism in this country.
I mean, my concern is that what if we did force the vote, and then all those squad members did vote for Medicare for All, and then we supported them, and then they did fascism on us?
That would have been the real...
they would have had us right where we wanted us.
But they're getting all these... Here's the amazing thing. On one hand, they're getting this preferential treatment where they're allowed to negotiate with Biden, but on the other hand, they're not leveraging their votes.
Yeah.
Now, presumably, they would leverage their votes to get negotiations with Biden.
Yeah. Well, they get the opportunity to be ignored by Joe Biden.
But I don't understand how you're supposed to leverage to get something, and that's different than getting preferential treatment from them.
I don't understand why he thought meeting himself helped. He's coming back? Oh.
Emma's back.
Oh, I'm back. Yeah, sorry about. Oh, my mic was off?
Yeah. No. And your computer and your camera.
Why did he think muting himself would mute you?
No, I muted him because he was talking over the clip.
Oh.
And he wasn't able to
Unmute himself.
Unmute himself.
Gotcha.
Oh, you muted him. I thought he unmuted. I thought he muted
over
him.
his clip.
Does he have the link? He could come back in if he wants.
Yeah, I mean, he's welcome to, if he can get it. Maybe he can get his camera set up again, too. He can go round 2. He's got the link. It's there for him if he wants it.
I told him we have an hour. He can come back on if he wants to.
I think he might just rather complain about it, but we'll see.
He's already got the put up those videos again. The where's that thing of all the stuff, all the memes he's put on Twitter.
Should I come back?
Yes, there you
If he wants to rejoin, I don't want to be here in case, I don't know.
I don't think he might be.
I don't want him to feel ganged up on because he clearly has a lot of opinions about
I'm looking at the chat. His fans are very upset. So I think it's just
he can come back.
I want to say,
Yeah.
hey, tell him to come back.
He's got the Zoom link,
He
right?
clearly had some
He's got the
technical
link.
difficulties, so if he wants to come back for round 2, I think that's the best thing for everybody, just to clear up some of these questions.
He can fix his camera. He can sort it all out. We can follow up on some of the stuff.
Let's see. Let's read some of our IMs, shall we? World-class illustrator. I can't believe you scheduled an hour for this garbage. Well, he was nice about understanding my.
Oh, he's back. Okay.
He's back. Okay, good.
Cool.
Death pulled from the future. Hinkle keeps complaining about AOC, but in the one example he gave, AOC voted the right way.
Can you hear me?
I'll jump off so you guys
Yes.
can be mano a mano.
Bro, like, first of all, my camera's not working. Second of all, your host muted me. I don't know who that was, but your host muted me.
Talking over the clip, it was me.
Okay.
Yeah, I tried to
and then I never unmuted my thing. I never touched any of my stuff on my end. And then you guys claimed that I muted myself. You guys muted me and tried to get me off the stream.
Matt just said it. No, you're back.
I just said I muted you because you're talking over
We
the
do
clip.
that
and then-
fairly
Why didn't you unmute me when it was over? And then you claimed that I muted myself and I was leaving.
Jackson, you're talking to me. Let me just clarify. I asked you to unmute yourself. You'll notice in the chat I said, "Are you able to unmute yourself?" And you left. But now that everything's sorted out again, except your camera.
Welcome.
So if you muted me, why didn't you just unmute me?
I tried to.
Jackson,
Jackson, Zoom.
You're back.
Let me explain. Let me just explain for everybody because I don't want this to be the thing that they hang their hat on. It says ask to unmute yourself. So I asked you to unmute yourself. You had to affirmatively unmute yourself. You didn't do that. But
Why
now,
didn't you just say that?
That's what I said actually right before you got on there. So
we have
you said it. You said it on a chat, but you didn't. I'm not reading the chat. I mean, I didn't even know there was a chat in here. But all right, let's keep talking. So, so my question, Sam, was, if you understand the idea behind forcing a vote on these sorts of policies, and the squad ran on a set agenda saying they were going to fight for that agenda, and then every time they have the opportunity to force a vote on any number of these bills, they choose not to, and they have no material gains, no material concessions that they can show for these potentially hypothetical secret concessions that you claim they're getting, potentially, then why aren't you criticizing them like we all are?
Okay, I don't know who we all are in this instance, but Jackson, you started this off by saying that they were getting preferential treatment by the Democrats, and one of those was their ability to go in and negotiate with Biden. Now, how is that preferential treatment different from exercising their leverage to get in and negotiate as to what the outcomes of bills will be?
Very, very easy answer to that. If you're looking at it from a practical sense as to what is practical, pragmatic politics, the idea of going in on a joint task force with Biden does not result in material changes. In addition to that, those joint task forces, with the exception of, say, the climate change one, they weren't negotiating based on their agenda and items that they could potentially get concessions on. They were negotiating in favor of Biden's agenda between the more progressive aspects of his agenda and the more conservative aspects of his agenda. And I think that they need to be forcing votes on their agenda, concessions for their agenda.
Forcing votes? What are you talking about? What does that mean, forcing votes?
Well, I would ask you, because in your initial video and in the debate you had with Brianna Joy Gray, you said that, yes, I think forcing a vote is a fundamentally good principle.
For getting leverage for certain things is a good principle. But I don't know what you mean forcing a vote. You could have a vote. Listen, there's a bill that has been introduced by Jayapal, right? A Medicare for All bill.
It was introduced after they had already voted for the subsidization of COBRA premiums for 6 months, which is something you said you vehemently disagreed with.
I did disagree with it. Yes. I railed on it quite a bit, actually.
You know, they actually delayed the introduction of Medicare for All so they could initially first pass the COBRA premium subsidies in that COVID bill.
Yes. Nancy Pelosi is a very outspoken critic of Medicare for All. I'm aware of that. That's why I've criticized Nancy Pelosi for that as well.
So if you think that maybe Medicare for All is not the best ask.
Do I think that putting a vote for Medicare for All on the floor is not the best ask? Correct.
Okay, so why don't they instead, focus on, if you think maybe these domestic policies are not their strong suit in forcing their agenda through, like Medicare for All, why don't they focus on foreign policy issues?
No. Jackson, you're talking jibber jabber here.
It's jibber jabber to talk about foreign policy. Is that jibber jabber to you?
If you force the vote for Medicare for All, let's say, it will lose. And not only will it not win, which you don't seem to think winning in the House is even meaningful, right? Because the Build Back Better is not going to become a bill because it's stopping in the Senate. What about losing a vote in the House?
You actually said on your show, and let me bring this up because this is your quote again. You said that you think that it's important to set markers even if votes fail. So when they can control, both houses and the White House, potentially with progressive politicians, they will have the record of who in the Democratic caucus votes for it.
Yeah, well, with the value we have of Medicare for All is that we know at the very least there's 100 Democrats who won't even co-sponsor the bill, right?
And you said that.
Now, for instance,
you said that you thought it was a good idea.
In the Senate, they voted to expand Social Security payments, 6 years ago, 5 years ago, which I think was very helpful, even though it couldn't pass, because it holds and binds those people. So yes, I mean, I do think there's some value to it, but it's nominal. I wouldn't exercise, the type of leverage you're talking about to get a vote, particularly on a bill where it's going to lose 300 to 100 or whatever, 310 to 110.
Well, it's not even about that. It's about getting concessions that might not be necessarily policies. Like, for example, you have brought up this idea of getting committee assignments multiple times. So why are they not working to get better committee assignments for, I don't know, say the next congressional cycle?
I hope they are.
Well, don't you think it's a bit of an issue?
In fact, I would argue that maybe AOC sending money to moderate and even conservative Democrats was part of that.
So you think that instead of leveraging their power, they should just be giving money?
Power, dude? There's 6 votes.
What power?
Yeah.
I just listed multiple votes that passed in the House with very slim margins, such as the Capitol Police and security funding.
If they sink those bills, what do you think they get?
If they sink those bills, they could get the concessions you were just referring to. And you said that you think maybe they got by giving money to DCCC Democrats. That's what you just said.
It doesn't work that way, Jackson.
So you have to pay $5,000 to 32 different DCCC candidates to get anything done?
I mean, it greases the wheels. Yeah.
It greases the wheels. So what if I told you instead of playing softball politics and greasing the wheels, which is all don't interrupt me. You've interrupted me so many times, Sam. You've interrupted me so many times throughout this entire debate.
I don't care.
You've interrupted me so many times. I've let you talk. Now let me talk. What if I told you instead of greasing
things that don't mean anything? Softball politics. What does that mean? What does softball politics mean?
Okay, let me be specific. Softball politics is giving $160,000 to DCCC Democrats when she said she was not going to do it. Please don't interrupt me. Hardball politics would be, say, blocking the State Department and USAID 12% funding increase, or blocking the Capitol Police and Security funding increase.
And what happens after you vote no on that?
You vote no on it and you block the bill from passing. And because these are things that the Democratic establishment really wants passed, you get concessions to vote for those policies. That's hardball politics.
What are you talking about? What vote for what policies?
Votes for, no, I said getting concessions. And when I say voting for policies,
retaliate against her?
No, I'm saying getting concessions to vote for the policies that they voted for without any concessions, like the increase in Capitol Police and security funding.
What would you do? What would you change in that Capitol Police funding that you think that they should have changed in that bill?
Well, I don't think that we should have given an increase to Capitol Police and security
So you
funding.
think they should just vote no against
Sam, here's the part you're missing. It's not about necessarily what they could change in that bill. It's about blocking that bill until they get a concession for something that substantively benefits the agenda they are fighting for.
What is this something that you're talking about?
You've listed numerous examples on your show because you said Medicare for all is not a good ask. So what if we did this, that, or the other? There's a whole host of things. I'm not a member of Congress.
But I don't understand.
I'm not a member of Congress.
You know how it works, Jackson, but you can't even articulate one thing that they're supposed to be asking for.
$15 minimum wage. Okay. Better committee assignments. Better committee assignments.
I'm not going to vote.
Committee assignments.
Okay. The committee assignments come out at the beginning of the year, and we'll find out about that.
Don't you think that they would say when they're receiving all the criticism, we voted to increase the Capitol Police and security because we got this in return?
I'm voting against. You want my vote. You want my vote, Nancy Pelosi, for the State Department increase by 12%. And I'm going to withhold that vote unless we have a vote on Medicare for all and the 100 people who are against it vote for it.
And you said that was a good idea at the time.
No, Jackson, I'm asking you. Do
you still not believe it's a good idea? Because at the time you said it was a good idea.
I very quickly said it wasn't a good idea.
So
very quickly after that video.
So you said that it was a good idea. You said then very quickly I changed my mind and I thought it was a bad idea. Now you cited your reasoning for this because you said you thought it was a part of a Jimmy Dore effort to hate on the squad. That's what you said. I've seen it multiple times. But the question is, you still support the fundamental strategy of forcing the vote, right?
What are you talking about? Force the vote? No, I do not sell. The idea of forcing a vote on something is stupid.
Yeah, the problem was with force the vote. Made all about a vote.
Shut up. I'm debating Sam. So you don't think that progressives?
Don't say shut up to him.
You don't think that progressives?
I want you to apologize.
You don't think progressives should leverage their power?
You just say that. I think progressives should leverage their power. Yes.
Okay, so that's called forcing the vote.
No, it's not.
You just said 1 minute ago that I don't want to use the phrase forced vote. I want to use the phrase leverage their power.
You guys made that.
How are those different?
Oh my God.
Because it's what you use your leverage for, Jackson. Okay? Look, I don't want to get into
it's how you exert that leverage, Sam.
So the substance doesn't matter?
I don't understand.
The substance of what strategy you employ to leverage your power. That's what matters. You think that instead of leveraging their power, they should donate $160,000 to DCCC Democrats.
Okay. I think contributing money to people gets them to vote your way. I think there are different things that you can do to build a coalition, to pass legislation, to materially benefit people.
And what happens when you have that coalition? What happens when you have a coalition?
I don't know if you would have gotten those corporatists who wanted the SALT reductions and et cetera, to vote for Build Back Better or to sign off on a provision to, let's say, have expanded child care or whatever it is, had they not built those bridges. Maybe, maybe not. We don't know for sure. We're not privy to those conversations. You can say, I don't think it's a good strategy to, and I can tell you this, the reason why Steny Hoyer is the whip of the caucus, of the Democratic caucus, is because Steny Hoyer gets all this corporate money that he doles out. He doesn't have to do much fundraising for himself.
We're not talking about
around the country. What goes around the country, and he builds support for things by donating money to different congressional candidates. And so is there value for the number one fundraiser, who happens to be a progressive, to wield that same type of power? My answer is yes, definitively.
So
I point to you exactly.
That's very interesting.
Where that power pays off.
That's very interesting.
No, I cannot.
That's very interesting, because earlier on in this debate, you quite literally said I had a problem.
Everyone heard the debate, Jackson. It'll be on video. You don't have to keep.
You said I had a problem. You don't want to talk about this. You said I had a problem with AOC donating $160,000 to DCCC Democrats when she said that she wasn't going to. So my question is, you just said a moment ago.
I had that problem, Jackson.
You just said a moment ago. You just said a moment ago that the squad.
Whatever.
You just said a moment ago that
people can look at the video, Jackson.
Okay, I would love to. You just said a moment ago that there is the potential for factions to form in Congress, and those factions can leverage their power. Did you not?
I don't know if I said that, but I agree with that statement.
Okay, so if you think that that is possible, and if the explicit goal of the Justice Democrats was to do just that, and if the reality of this session of Congress is they could have blocked certain votes that were, in my opinion, bad, maybe in your opinion, I don't know what you think about those votes, but they could have blocked those votes to get concessions in return. They haven't done that. Don't you think that that is a failure of their strategy?
In general, no. I think that if they got no, because you're not giving me a specific instance, and I don't. There are votes that they may be for or against. I don't know.
So Sam, I actually
respect
you more. I actually respect you more after this debate than I initially did coming into the debate, because you said on multiple occasions, like when I brought up the sanctions.
He's tearing up.
when I brought up the sanctions, when I brought up other issues that I had disagreements with them on, with the exception of the State Department and Capitol Police funding, you actually said that those were bad things, that you disagreed with what they did, and in some cases, but not all, you criticized them. But what you still fail to recognize is that the explicit strategy that the Justice Democrats ran on, which was to create those factions and essentially be a thorn in the side of the Democratic establishment, kind of in a way in which the Tea Party
explicitly that our job.
How many times are you going to interrupt me? You're interrupting me as many times as you said Jimmy Dore during the Breonna Joy Gray debate. I wasn't done. So they were to be a thorn in the side of the Democratic establishment.
You know what?
They have not done that.
On being a thorn in the side of the Democratic establishment is literally for children.
Or the People's Party. Go win some races.
Like, I don't like, I want material benefits for people. And if that means that they stroke the Democratic establishment or they are thorn in it, I don't care about that. That's for children. That's
it's not for children. It's
no,
not
I
for
don't
children.
care about the establishment.
Sam,
Mommy, daddy, this. Who cares?
By not being a thorn in the side of the establishment, they actually hurt themselves. Because by donating, yes, they did. By donating to the DCCC candidates who were going to be challenged by progressive primary candidates, they have essentially ruled out the odds of those progressive primary candidates challenging the DCCC candidates in this next election cycle.
Candidates?
What?
Which progressive candidates were running against those?
Ava Patsova is the one that comes to mind. Arizona's first district. She was going to run against one of these DCCC candidates. Who
was the candidate that AOC gave to that Ava Petrova was going to run against?
What's that? Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Who's the candidate that AOC gave money to that Ava Petrova was going to run against? And what was Petrova's chance of winning?
The candidate that she gave money to was whoever represents the first district. It's Tom O'Halloran. He's a corporate Democrat. Ava Patsova she ran against him in I believe she ran against him in 2020, and then she was going to run against him again. She did very well. She didn't even have I believe she didn't even have Justice Democrats backing at that time. But the question is, why is AOC?
Oh, wait, AOC gave money to a candidate that Justice Democrats are running against?
No, I said that I don't think she was actually endorsed by Justice Democrats in that race, but there was the potential for her to be endorsed by them in the next race. She wrote an article in The Intercept. I suggest you read it. It's really interesting. But Sam, the question is not about the odds or the likelihood. No one thought AOC was going to beat Joe Crowley. She had no backing. She had no odds of winning, and she still won. Now, imagine if there was that apparatus of AOC and the progressives behind Ava Putsova, who is a convincing candidate, who is respected by many of these progressive institutions, who did write an incredible article in The Intercept about this. Don't you think that there are some more Ava Putsovas out there who could have challenged DCCC corporate candidates that AOC donated to before primary even took place?
I mean, it's possible.
It's possible. And that's called softball politics, or greasing the wheels, as you put it. And that's why I think it's a failed strategy, because they are actually hurting themselves, their broader movement of establishing a larger faction.
Now, do you still think that they are the vanguard of fascism in this country? Because if they are actually to help themselves, their strategy, that would be sort of problematic if you think they're fascists, right?
I'm not talking about helping themselves. I'm talking about fighting for the agenda that they campaigned on and utilizing the strategy that they said that they were going to carry out via the Justice Democrats faction in Congress, which, according to that, little discussion we just had about the DCCC donations, they're not doing that. They're choosing to grease the wheels, so to speak.
Well, I think they're probably doing both.
If they were doing both, don't you think that they would have blocked any number of those policies?
No.
Why?
I mean, I don't know what any number of those policies you're talking about, but but you're conflating.
Last time I tried to list those policies, you said, Jackson, stop listing policies.
You're conflating electoral strategy with legislative strategy.
Let's just take three in particular. The speakership vote, the Department of State and USAID 12% funding increase, and the Capitol Police vote. Let's just take those three. Those are three examples in which they could have leveraged power.
Well, they could have, or they could have just voted against it.
Or they could have just voted against it. Yeah, I mean, there's more that I have here. I have 18 listed. And each one, has...
Like, so for instance, for the speakership, they may have felt like, well, okay, we cannot vote, but ultimately we're going to have to. I mean, you just said yourself, the precedent was that they take 12 votes and that they end up going to land on Pelosi. So if Pelosi knows that, if you're right, and there's no other option as to who's going to be speaker, then what?
Well, what if I told you that there potentially could have been other options? You could vote for anyone. They could have voted for Barbara Lee if they wanted to. I mean, John Boehner served Speaker 2011 to 2015. He got more, Republicans elected since any year since 1928. And he had popular support until the Tea Party came along and they forced him out. He had to retire before he even did another speakership election because he knew he was going to lose. So why could the squad not have done something like that?
Who was the other candidate? Barbara Lee didn't want to run.
Anyone could have run. It doesn't matter. Anyone could have run.
They didn't.
Why didn't they?
I don't know, but they didn't. There was no other person to vote for. So after 12 votes in your scenario,
yes,
Nancy Pelosi knows she's going to get elected.
No,
knows
because Sam, if you don't think that at a time when 75% of Americans wanted Nancy Pelosi to step down as speaker, she has record low approval rating, that people are not going to coalesce around a movement to get a new speaker, then you're delusional, because that is what would have happened. And even if Sam, this was the idea behind Force the Vote. Even if it eventually, after 13, 15, 18 rounds, ended up with Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House, they still would have been able to get concessions because of the spectacle they would have drawn by delaying an already unpopular politician's, rise to the speakership position.
So there was a movement afoot in the country, presumably by Democrats, to get a different Speaker of the House other than Nancy Pelosi. That's what you're telling me. And the spectacle
I'm saying that you inspire change.
The spectacle created would have magically gotten them the ability to get whatever they want. Like the spectacle almost of like forcing the Republicans to filibuster a Voting Rights Act.
I'm talking about the spectacle of Representative Jeanette Rankin starting a House floor vote on women's suffrage in 1918. And because of the mass public appeal that was drawn after the introduction of that vote in the House floor debate it started, within 1 year, we achieved women's suffrage in this country. That's what I'm talking about.
I see. It would have been like women's suffrage to get what?
It's the strategy. It's not the fact that you have a major.
Oh, it was just a coincidence that it was about women getting the right to vote. Had nothing to do with the success of that.
Did I? Hey! Did I or did I just not list John Boehner and the Tea Party as an example? I don't only cherry pick my examples. I mean, I just listed the Republican Party as a beautiful example of how the strategy could be employed.
How there was somebody to run against Boehner.
Sam, the idea is you delay and you potentially find someone to run against Nancy Pelosi. It doesn't matter if there's someone who wants to run. Sam, they can vote for anyone.
They're going to vote.
You understand how a speakership vote works?
Yeah, I understand how the speakership vote, but you
realize that they could vote for anyone, right?
Yeah, but
you realize that there were Democrats who voted for other Democrats who weren't actively pursuing the speakership?
Are you telling me that there was another candidate? Who was that candidate that was going to win?
Do you understand that there were Democrats who voted for
with this?
Do you understand that there were Democrats who voted for other Democrats?
Nancy Pelosi gets the speakership.
Sam.
But she knows she's going to get the speakership, but that's still going to force a vote because it happened with suffragette, with women's right to vote.
So why did some if you have to have a declared speakership, campaign,
Jackson,
why did some Democrats vote for other? Why did some Democrats? Why did some Democrats vote for other Democrats who weren't actively pursuing the speakership? If that's the case,
they can.
Oh, okay. So that's super interesting because you were saying that they couldn't employ the strategy because there was no one who was actively pursuing.
So these 6 people would have voted for somebody else.
You know that there was someone who even voted for, I believe, Tammy Duckworth, who's not even in the House.
How did she win?
Did she? Okay, they could. Of course, they could vote for somebody else.
Okay. Interesting. Because a minute ago, you just said, "Well,
vote for Tammy Duckworth?
There's no one else pursuing
all the
the
concessions
speakership."
they wanted.
You were just saying no one else was pursuing the speakership.
Oh, Jesus Christ! All right. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, you want to keep litigating this force the vote a year later. It's a failed strategy.
It's not a year later, Sam. There again, I listed 18 different times throughout just 2021 in which they could have, as you put it, leveraged their power on given votes by blocking the passage of them. That's force the vote in a nutshell. And you're saying that force the vote was just during the speakership vote.
I don't know what to tell you. I mean, this is honestly like arguing.
I don't know what to tell you. You accused me earlier of being the guy who gets too attached to politicians. You are the one who gets too attached to politicians and refuses to criticize them where it matters most. Sure, you'll occasionally talk poorly when they make an abhorrent vote, but you will not criticize them on their overall strategy, which is pursuing a greasing of the wheels rather than playing hardball politics and leveraging their power.
I just don't make the assessment of their power like you do.
It's not making an assessment. It's looking at how closely these votes pass and knowing that they had enough people to block their passage.
Well, in some instances, maybe they didn't want to block their passage. I mean, I don't know what to tell you.
Then what's the point of the Justice Democrats if they are not going to? And it's not necessarily about blocking.
You
it's
know
about
what they're
delaying in some cases.
They're more progressive.
What is the point about the Justice Democrats if they're not doing what they set out to do?
They're the most progressive members of Congress.
Is that the bar you want to set them to? That's the bar you want to judge them upon.
Yeah.
I think that's, I mean, what about when the squad was not in Congress? Did you actively support Nancy Pelosi because she was one of the most progressive in Congress?
I supported Bernie Sanders.
What about the House? I'm talking about the House. We're talking about the House.
I mean, I didn't perceive Nancy Pelosi as the most progressive member. At one point, I thought she was the best when Donald Trump came to office. I figured she might be the best person to be in the leadership while they're in the minority. But subsequent to that, I felt like I would rather have someone who was not even progressive be in the leadership of the House. I mean, and I think to a certain extent, I know you watched the Ilhan Omar interview, you didn't quite fully understand the leadership conversation, but I think that she was implying that you don't really. The leadership position should not necessarily be about whether they're progressive or not. I think it's really more about the amount of power that you can amass amongst the caucus.
So Sam,
and
when you talk about power in the caucus,
or sophomore members of Congress, 6 members of Congress just don't have that kind of power.
So when
you talk about the Freedom Caucus,
do have that type of power.
People getting rid of Boehner, you're talking about
do have that type of power, Sam.
Who were secret members of this caucus, and we just don't have that kind of power yet.
First of all, the Republican majority at the time was much bigger than what we see today, and the squad has multiple opportunities, 18 again that I've listed, in which there was must-pass bills or near must-pass bills in which the vote was so slim.
What is a must-pass bill in your estimation?
A must-pass bill is something that either must pass to continue with the session of Congress, such as a adoption of House rules, speakership, House vote, or the near must-pass bills that I was referring to are things that are a top priority of the Biden administration to pass to solidify his legacy.
I mean, the must-pass bills would be something like a debt ceiling or something to that.
Sure. Avoiding government shutdowns.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's been probably, I'd say, 6 or 7 of those.
Okay. Now, and your argument is that if they inhibited the passage of this bill, they'd be able to get stuff each time. The Democrats would reward.
Yes, that's how politics works in Congress. This is what Republicans and Democrats have done for years. This is how it works.
So in other words, like when I don't know, like Lynn Cheney, for instance, Liz Cheney, sorry, like when she bucks them and they reward her, is that it? She gets stuff from the Republican Party.
I think it's a little bit of a different makeup with Liz Cheney in the Republican Party.
I'm just you're telling us exactly how
you're speaking vaguely. You're speaking vaguely. I'm talking about specific votes that they could have blocked. You're speaking about bucking the GOP establishment on maybe a talking point or maybe impeachment. Are you referring to? I don't know what you're referring to.
Yeah. Impeachment, January 6th commission.
Well, the difference is Liz Cheney doesn't, in some cases, she has been able to whip even Democrats to block, some of the MAGA agenda, such as when Trump wanted to remove he wanted to do a partial removal of troops from Germany and Afghanistan. She whipped together even one of my own former congresspeople, Mike Levin from California's 49th district, to vote in unison with a plurality, I guess, of Republicans on that measure to block Trump. And it succeeded. But the difference between Liz Cheney and the squad or the Justice Democrats, whatever, is that the Justice Democrats have a set ideology. They campaign to form a faction and essentially leverage their power to carry out, their agenda or to get concessions that flow in line with their agenda. So my problem is they are not doing this. And the votes that they are passing are votes that I, entirely disagree with, such as those sanctions I mentioned, such as Capitol Police funding, the Israel Iron Dome vote. Iron Dome vote is not one of those because that passed by such overwhelming margins,
And you wanted to debate me on this because you want me to have the same agenda that you have.
No, I want you to hold the squad to what they said they were going to do and what they said they were going to fight for. I am curious, what is your preferred method of holding the squad accountable when they continue to not fight for their agenda by pursuing the strategy of leveraging their power?
If it makes sense to primary them, I would primary them. But I don't think it's worth the deployment of resources personally to primary the most progressive members of Congress.
Okay, so at what point do you maybe begin to think that instead of continuing to operate within the confines of the Democratic Party and primarying more people and ending up with the same results,
this
they
is
need something else.
What we should have had a debate about, Jackson. And I was trying to get to, because really, if you think that the progressive Democrats in Congress are the vanguard of fascism, if you think that they are worthless, then you think the entire Democratic Party is worthless. And what you're really coming on to argue is that we should be supporting a third party.
No, what I came on to argue, Sam, what I came on to argue is the fact that the only time that you defend the squad nowadays is when you make videos about Jimmy Dore, and you know that those are the only videos that get you views.
So, I'm sorry.
You make these videos about Jimmy Dore, at times attacking the squad, and you defend the squad, and then the only reason why you do this, though, I think, is because you want to do a hit piece on Jimmy Dore. And even though your channel has over 1 million subscribers, your only videos that get views are ones about Jimmy Dore and when you defend the squad and so on and so forth.
Okay. You seem very invested in YouTube, dude.
In other words, you wanted to come on and debate about.
Sam holds a major stake in left YouTube, as do the Young Turks. That's why I am invested.
Well, I don't get views. I mean, so I don't know why you say I have a stake.
You get a lot of views. I just said, though, you get a lot of views on the videos in which you go after Jimmy Dore for criticizing the squad.
Well, we should probably do more Jimmy Dore videos. But but that aside, is that what you want to come on to debate? That you don't like the idea that I'm doing Jimmy Dore videos?
Sam, I don't know how many times I have to say what I came on to debate. You refuse to actually hold the squad accountable. And you said maybe at one point, you know, I am going to support primarying them, but I don't think that's the best, you know, way to leverage our power and resources. But I guess I would just pose the question because, you know, I don't support primarying the squad. I don't support primarying Democrats right now because I think that.
Why?
Because I think that the Justice Democrats are a failed strategy and they're choosing to play party politics and pass the DNC's agenda.
Also, you just think that we should vote for third party candidates?
I think that there's other avenues we need to look into, but what I think we all need to come.
Well, what are those other avenues? Why? I mean, this is what's important about this conversation.
Sam, what I think we all need to come into agreement upon is that the Justice Democrats, their strategy has failed, and the squad is now towing the line of the DNC. That's something that you still refuse to acknowledge or address. Or even attempt to hold them accountable upon.
I disagree. You've already stated that you consider them more progressive than the Gottheimers and the Manchins of the party.
I disagree with you. You just said that you will occasionally call them out for some of the bad votes they take. There were some that I mentioned that you did not call them out over, which is okay. I don't expect you to follow like every single detail of, you know, congressional votes. But at the end of the day, you are not criticizing them for failing upon their overall strategy of forming a faction that can leverage their power in Congress. And you are instead giving them some, at least tepid support for greasing the wheels and giving $160,000 to DCCC Democrats.
Correct.
So that's where I guess you and I just disagree.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the People's Party.
Would you support AOC giving more money to DCCC Democrats, even though she said she wasn't going to do that?
If she made an assessment that there was a strategic value for it, I would be okay with it.
Even if there's more opportunities to leverage their power on must-pass or near must-pass bills?
I don't agree with your premise that.
What don't you agree about it? Because do you agree that they don't have the number of votes?
Again, over and over again. I don't think
you haven't outlined yet.
Effective is effective.
You don't think that they have enough votes or what?
I just don't think it's going to go down the way you think it's going to go down, Jackson.
What do you mean by that?
I don't think your idea of how Congress works is how Congress works.
It is how it's worked in the past. I mean, this is how Congress works.
The suffragettes. Yes, I understand.
No, I wasn't going to bring that up. I was going to bring Boehner up. But the idea is that if they, maybe this has never happened before in Congress. Maybe, hey, Sam, maybe this has never happened before in Congress. Don't you think that they should at least try?
Jackson,
because this was their strategy.
When you were in junior high,
I don't want to talk
was
about
covering every day what John Boehner was doing.
This is very weird.
I can tell you.
This is very weird. I don't want to. What are you doing talking about junior high? I'm talking about the fact you changed subjects.
There was not
You're changing
four
subjects.
members. There was not
changing
four
subjects.
sophomore members of Congress who eliminated John Boehner.
You are changing subjects.
No, you brought up John Boehner. You brought up John Boehner.
And then you went to this weird analogy about my middle school.
It's not an analogy.
What I'm talking about is
not
the fact
what an
that
analogy is.
So you still have not outlined this.
I was saying
you
that
still
I
have not said
very carefully what happened to John Boehner, and none of it went down the way you say it did.
Okay, first of all, that's incorrect. But second of all, you did not acknowledge what I initially questioned to you.
Which was what?
I mean, maybe if you'd listened, you'd heard me. What I said was that the squad could have blocked the passage of these bills. You have not contested that they didn't have enough votes to block or delay.
They voted against it, yes.
Block or delayed. Okay, so you're saying they could have done this.
They could have voted against it.
They could have blocked or delayed it, yes. So why do you think that would have failed? Even if it's never happened before?
They could have voted against it, and if they had enough votes to kill the bill, they could have killed the bill.
Or they could have delayed it and renegotiated.
What do you mean delayed it?
They could have told Nancy Pelosi that we are not going to vote for this unless you give us substantive concessions. They could have gone out on CNN and MSNBC on Mehdi Hassan's show and say, I'm not prepared to vote for this bill until we get these concessions that we have listed. Don't you think that is an effective strategy? And don't you think that's also the strategy that the Justice Democrats initially ran on?
I think that could work on occasion, but I think that Nancy Pelosi, for the most part, is beloved by Democratic voters, for better or for worse.
That's incorrect. She's got a very, very low approval rating. But
it's not true with Democratic primary voters.
Google this up.
Let's look it up, man.
Sam. So you just acknowledged.
Fact check for you, Jackson.
I just said she had a low approval rating. Did you not hear what I just said?
Democratic primary voters.
Go.
I'm talking about the whole of this country. But Sam, you just said, I don't want to let you off on this. You just said,
Bradley, will you look that up and put it up on
Look it up. I could not, I don't care. So you just said that on occasion you could see how leveraging their power by either withholding their votes for a given policy could work. So why are you not criticizing the squad when they choose not to do this?
I don't think that they should do it randomly. I don't know.
I didn't say randomly. I just said they could do it. And you just said that.
Jackson, there was a $3.5 trillion bill that was passed in the House that included some of the key priorities that these lawmakers wanted. And you're suggesting they're not leveraging their vote because it didn't pass in the Senate.
No, I'm saying because they are voting for bills that did pass in the House and in the Senate and were signed into law, and they're not withholding their support for those bills, like Capitol Police funding, like State Department funding, the House speakership.
What is the value of them voting against Capitol Police funding relative to getting pre-K for people?
You just said it. You just said
they got the pre-K.
You just said that Sam, you just said that the value in it, this is your words, that the value in it is that, yes, I could see that sometimes working. You said that.
Listen, Jackson.
How many times do you want to change the subject before you
Jackson,
finally address that you're not holding them accountable?
You
Sam,
want them to
you are not holding them accountable.
To get stuff that they want, and they got it in the bill.
You just said that they could do that, though.
Yes, I agree that there is such a thing as leverage and that it can be used. And I'm suggesting they've done it.
I'm suggesting to you that they haven't done it because they haven't withheld their votes. You're saying that the Build Back Better agenda is.
How do you know they didn't withhold their votes?
Build Back Better agenda is Biden's agenda. That's not even their agenda.
How do you know they didn't withhold their votes and Nancy Pelosi didn't go to him and say, I owe you one?
And that's why they're not going harder at him like you suggested up top.
I don't think that they're doing that because if they were doing that, if they were going to be withholding their support, they would do what Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman did before the speakership vote. Do you remember what they did? They went out on, was it Dana Bash's show or something like that? They went out on some corporate news show and they said that we are not going to guarantee a vote for Nancy Pelosi.
Why are you putting an accent on there? Oh, because it's Bowman. All right.
I'm putting an accent on there? what the hell is this? We are not going to be voting for Nancy Pelosi guaranteed unless we get substantive things in return. And they listed two things, I think. I think they listed reparations and they listed one other policy. At the end of the day, they did not coalesce and try to make these things happen. But that is what you need to do if you have big asks or you have, concessions that you want. You need to be willing to make a public cry to the people to support you in your effort. You've also acknowledged that AOC has some of the most power in Congress. She's got the most fundraising. She's got the most Instagram, Twitter followers.
She got the most Twitter followers. Okay.
So she should use that to her leverage when she makes these public cries for support when she is going to be withholding her support for these bills.
Okay.
What do you mean, okay? What is this okay? You have one of the largest news shows on YouTube for leftist politics, and you refuse to criticize them. You just say, okay, you say, I don't care. What is this? Do you not have any values that you stand upon?
No. I don't. Are we done?
Let's be done.
75% Democrats support Nancy Pelosi.
That'll have a lot of value in the primary.
I'm not terribly happy about that.
Maybe we can hear more about the People's Party next.
But to be fair, that was 2 days ago, so that could have changed. That's pretty much a straight
Maybe
line.
once they hear about force the vote, it'll dip.
I mean, I think to a certain extent, like there is.
Did I say that she has?
I thought you hung up.
In the Democratic Party. Did I say that?
I don't know.
Are you putting words in my mouth?
Honestly, I stopped listening to you some time ago, to be honest with you. But I appreciate.
Maybe, hey Sam. Last words here.
Sure.
Maybe listening to the people who used to be your viewers and used to be your fans, like me, should be something that you do in the future. Thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate the conversation.
You're still a viewer, Jackson. As far as I can tell.
What's that?
Not only are you still a viewer, but you actually show it to the people who watch your show. So I'm
not a fan of you anymore, though. That's the difference.
Jesus,
I'm sorry about that.
His heart's broken. That's just from what, a week?
Thank you, though. I appreciate you coming on, Jackson. I'm sorry.
All right. I'll see you guys.
Accountable.
Yeah.
You never responded to the fascism thing. Never, ever.
Or the fact that he thought that there's no
the leadership
vote.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I think we learned something.
I'm going to turn
Force the vote equals leverage.
When was it fan of mine?
Matt, why are you muting me? I need to turn my camera back on.
Oh, God.
How dare
I'm
you?
sorry, people. I know. I am very sorry about that. People are a little mad. Let's go, Jackson, says John McDroppel.
Wait, I can't turn my video on.
Microphone specialist, longtime Majority Report member here. I am laughing very hard. Poor Jackson. Awesome possum. That was exhausting. John, let's see. Jen Hexer, please be fucking done. I apologize, folks. I couldn't help it. All right, let's read some IMs here, and then we'll get out of here.
Okay. Can you guys let me? I need to. My camera's turned off. Yeah, either Bradley or Matt. Yeah, I can't turn it on.
Oh my God, we got a lot of IMs. Will Jackson criticize his daddy Dorf for sociopathic COVID takes? Oh no, okay. I may not know what I'm talking about, says Marxist, Leninist, imperialist patriot. I may not know what I'm talking about, but you wouldn't know because you're so interrupty, Sam. But that's okay because I'm just going to make a series of lists without reference to the context in which these things happen, since my argument falls apart in context. And before giving you enough time to respond to the items on my list in context, I will have already acquired my clips of you victimizing me. Don't interrupt me, Sam. Vaping Goldfish. Go on WGBH Boston Public Radio and talk about the live show. I bet they love you. Chris Burdick. Oh my God, Sam, you've got to stop giving platforms to dumb fucks like Jackson. My blood pressure can't take it. Quite frankly, I'm not sure yours can either.
I was surprised to see when we found out who he was, like through that I am, or how often, who's the IMer who asked to debate? Like, I had no idea how many videos were being done about us by this person.
I mean, I think he's an attention seeker.
On some level, there is a similar dynamic, I think, that happened with, he became disappointed in me in the same way that he was disappointed in the squad.
So that's kind of like a parasocial thing, because it's just
There's a little bit of parasocial quality.
You're too attached to politics. You're the one too attached to politicians, Sam, because you don't fixate on them and present them as the primary obstacles to progress.
To be fair, we also didn't know of him because of this.
That is true. I didn't realize that was him.
But I never saw that. I never saw that before.
I saw that a lot. I don't know when that came out, but I feel like it wasn't that long ago.
November 2020 was that tweet.
Yeah, but I feel like I saw that more recently than a year ago. But I didn't know it was him.
What's with our debate partners and dad content?
That's true.
Something.
Train Boy, Justice Guire and his jurisprudence is based on the doctrine of dudes rock. Below me, last week on Binder's show, you had a Jamaican libertarian Crowder fan call in. Sam, you must be jealous and yearning for that. Jackson's biggest error is to think the Dem leadership, says right-handed lefty, gives a shit. If the squad blocked one of these votes, the Dem would unleash holy war on them upon their next run for office. That's right. Jackson wants to hike the squad accountable, but not primary them. How would he hold them accountable then? By talking bad about them on YouTube? That's the thing, is that I think primarying them is really the only way ultimately to hold them into account. I really think that the debate he wanted to have was about a third party, because I don't understand, like, this is just pure nihilism.
No, it's too hard to have that debate. The People's Party went up in flames. You can't actually affirmatively say, let's do a third party, because the Green Party also, and none of those people have learned any lessons from the failures of those parties, but what they want to do is just attack the Democrats.
Yeah, and the bottom line is like, look, you could say that, I mean, this whole thing about what kind of bar do you want to hold them to? No, it's all relative. Mm-hmm. That's the best that we have. Does that suck? Yeah, that sucks.
I mean, what bar would a Marxist-Leninist hold them to?
I mean,
American patriot too.
That's the thing I think that he has not sort of like, if I give him the credit of being honest about it, he's just can't quite wrap his head around. If this is the best that we can get, and you're not going to primary them, then you build on that and you try and figure out ways in which to empower them and increase their power. Like the dynamics that are taking place in the House caucus is just not terribly obvious to us at any given time. And Boehner was speaker for six years. It was not he just couldn't handle it anymore. I think he thought that he wasn't going to have the votes, that other people that were going to vote against him, but not 6 members, that there was going to be literally a majority of the members were going to vote for somebody else. It's not a small cabal of Tea Partiers or Freedom Caucus specifically that was going to vote out John Boehner.
How many Republicans made the Tea Party in '87? Just out of curiosity, do you guys know the number off?
In 1987?
No, sorry, in 2010. I mixed up with the actual.
The Freedom Caucus or the Tea Party?
So there were 87 of them in all, Republican men and women who remade the House, the Tea Party. So 87 on the November 2nd, 2010 election. 87.
Yes. Who came in the Tea Party sort of wave. Yes.
So that
as opposed to like generously 8.
Yeah.
In the
generously.
Squad. Right.
And there was, and they had another caucus known as the Freedom Caucus, where the members were secret, and so it wasn't quite clear how many there were. But and I think part of that was because some people agreed with some parts of it. I don't know why they did that, but it was at least a multiple of 8 or 9 times the members of the squad.
But anyway, good comparison besides that.
It's always snowy in Ottawa. Dark Money by Jay Mayer was such an amazing, depressing book. Just solid history analysis, 30 years evolving right-wing lobbying and astroturf. Sam's luscious beard. I think something that's going heavily underreported is that a lot of Afghan arrivals to the U.S. do not have actual immigration status or pathway or permanent residency citizenship. They're considered parolees, simply let into the country on humanitarian need. After 2 years of arrival, they'll be accruing unlawful residence and will be subject to removal. This came up in our first conversation with Ilhan Omar, and my understanding is they were working on this, on figuring out how to take them from parolee into permanent citizenship. But I don't know. Jimbo, Breyer retires. Will Manchin demand reinstatement of the filibuster for Supreme Court nominees?
I mean, this is his, like, a gift to him in many ways. It's a new opportunity, another bite at the apple, so to speak, to obstruct.
Left go Brandon. Why are they complaining about the lack of treatment? Maybe a lot of their viewers are ending up in certain situation where they really wish there was treatment that it works once an infection is already bad.
The Fox clips.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Jersey Max. Hey, Sam, I'm still a fan, and I think you're further left and I'm further left than you. It's okay. I enjoy the show. I mean, part of the explicit purpose of this show is to pull people to the left and to the left of me. I would say a significant portion of our listeners are to the left of me, or at least they self-identify that way. And certainly, I think a lot of people who are to the left got their introduction to a lot of this politics through the show. That's the point of the show.
There are two ways you can move too far, or to the left away from this show. One of them impresses me, and that's, actually doing organizing and work in your community. The other, people just define it as like, oh, I listen to different shows now. And I think that's like, okay, cool, good for you, but fine.
Right. But I think, like, there's a difference between just being anti-establishmentarian and being left.
A lot of these people that define themselves as to the left of us, I don't think are to the left of us, frankly.
No. I mean, Anthony, this is John Hopkins expert, is from my hometown. He's good on Twitter to follow. He makes a lot of appearances on all cable networks. Don't know how he has the stamina. Roger, Mexico, any chance on having Sarah Schumann on as a guest? Her new book on ACT UP New York during the 80s and 90s is both a great record of political activism during AIDS crisis and helps recenter the conversation around women, people of color, who have been largely ignored from that time period and throughout the AIDS crisis. We'll put her on the list, Bradley. Hayden from Texas. Matt, pull that shit up, or Bradley, I'm going to lose it. This guy's nuts because 6 members are a majority. You can't move past this one line. Walrus, Alex Berenson, the pandemic's wrongest man. Sam Breyer is retiring, says Thames Darwin. Benito, obnoxious Boston accent, please. Hey, Sam, did you see the article in The Prospect last week about Stop and Shop's monopolistic practices on Cape Cod? Any thoughts? I didn't see that. Tim Pools, economic researcher. What's the over-under on rich old white man replacing Breyer? Oh, I would be surprised if that happens.
I think I saw, there's already a push for a black woman to be one of the nominees. I saw Cori Bush was tweeting about it.
I'd be very surprised if it's not. I mean, I would say it's a much better bet, corporatist, but
young,
but young corporatist. But hope springs eternal. Tim Poole's economics researcher. He watches the show a lot, but doesn't know why Sam doesn't support Force the Vote. What a charlatan. What he's saying, I believe he watches the show a lot. I mean, based upon just even like
the sheer volume of content.
Theorist, what's he saying is all true, but it all comes down to a battle for the Supreme Court, as they are already overruling federal power to do anything about voting rights. Justice Brennan thought the standards of the Voting Rights Act had become embedded in the 14th Amendment jurisprudence. This is already overruled by Alito and Roberts. Yes. Stupid sexy candy. Justice Breyer to retire. Henry Gold. Justice Breyer to retire. Yes. Do you think the Dems will get their act together for a future court appointment? Well, there's no doubt about it. Dank Uger. No more Twitch debate lords, please. I prefer our callers. Louis, I still predict we'll end up with Merrick Garland on the court because, of course, no way. No, I would, no, don't even joke like that. Martin Orlando, with Justice Breyer retiring, do you think we'll see Manchin and Sinema defect on some technical protest of Biden's pick? Yeah, I would imagine. Jonathan Armstead, can you get Emma to get Dave Zirin on? Can you or Emma get Dave Zirin on before the Super Bowl? I want to know what woke players to root for in the big game. Any Olympics info and his thoughts on baseball?
I could tell you.
Lockout Hall of Fame. Kurt Schilling didn't get in, which makes him the first Republican to lose a vote because of his views on January 6th.
I'd like to have Dave on. I'd like to have Dave
Yeah,
on.
that would be
but
fun.
I
We
mean,
should have him on soon.
Yeah.
The Jones, it really isn't clear that the variants are more contagious. Societal factors like lockdowns and holidays are probably very important. Recent lab research has shown little difference in viral DNA between variants, where RNA. This is a good point. It's very difficult to compare the R naught of these things because our RT has changed. You know, you measure like COVID wild type during the lockdown versus now. It could be that people are getting out and about and are much more loosey-goosey. It's very difficult to assess that. Timmy D. What would be the difference if AOC acted exactly like Jackson wanted? Quit wasting our time with this bullshit 19-year-old rich bitch. I mean, that's the point. That is the point ultimately. It's unclear. It all just seems to be performative.
Yes, well, when it's all YouTube related or influencer related or commentary related, it makes sense that that kind of analysis is projected onto our lawmakers. You know, it's very, very shallow and silly. It's
a general notion of like, I want a specific concession on this vote. What concession? Doesn't matter. Like it's all like aesthetic. Bottom line is that they passed what could have been, and it was, smaller than I would have wanted, but that $3.5 trillion, $350 billion a year in new spending, a significant portion of which was keeping millions of kids out of poverty. Now, they all voted against the BIF, which I think was a good idea because that was the only type of leverage you had with the Senate. But the squad had no ability to leverage the Senate. You could argue that the entire Democratic caucus could have. Argue it by withholding a vote on the bipartisan bill. But that was a leadership decision. That's the only place where there's any type of leverage with the Senate, assuming that Manchin and Sinema cared about that. Now, Sinema probably did. Manchin, I don't know.
I just think it's so funny when this genre of folks needs to stick to the critique and not to, what is my solution to it? Because
right, of course.
Well, that's why when the third party question came up, that's not the debate I'm having. It's like what the response was, because when you get into the nitty gritty of that, there's no solution. It's just critique.
Yeah, because
aesthetic critique.
My solution is, I don't know how closely he watches. We've been talking about that fundraising and stuff the whole time, and they should think about pulling it in case of leverage. But yeah, it's hard, I think, to have this kind of energy when you were bullshitting around with the People's Party 8 months ago. And where's that? Where's all those primary challenges we were promised?
Exactly. I mean, they were going to primary 100 Democrats who were going to vote against Medicare for all. Where's two?
It was all attention-seeking media grift.
Maya, since Jordan Peterson is making the rounds again, I think there needs to be more discourse on the way that he flutters his fingers around when he's trying to make some banal and obvious statement. Sound profound and complicated, really strange to say the least.
Yeah.
All right, let's read 10 more of these and then we'll get out of here. I'm sorry, folks. I apologize. Let's see. Putin University. I know you are, but what am I? I thought I was bad at debating, but goddamn. Prairie Fire Kowalski. Hey, Sam, Emma, MR crew. So I looked at the State Department budget increase. As I suspected, the Office of Foreign Disaster Relief is under the umbrella of the State Department. When the USA sends the Navy to Japan and Indonesia after a tsunami, or to the massive floods in East Africa, or the Air Force massive fires in Australia, it's the State Department that foots a sizable portion of the bill. The department is probably going to be constantly looking for more funds as climate change gets worse. The Navy seems to be under the impression that relief efforts will be its main use by mid-century. Left is best.
Yeah, he was conflating the State Department with the Pentagon, in my opinion.
He couldn't tell me what the issue was with that State Department.
Well, I mean, like, yeah, the National Endowment for Democracy might be through the State Department, and I think the Squad should not be supportive of that stuff.
How much
even if they can leverage it or force the vote on it, right? Like, that's the thing is, like, force the vote gets extrapolated into block the vote or just the basic concept of leverage. It's all silly.
And it's also sort of like the problem with them standing in the way of any type of bill is that there has to be some type of public support that gives them some support. This doesn't happen in a vacuum.
We've already exhausted this silliness, I think.
Socialist. The wise man bowed his head solemnly and spoke. There's actually zero difference between good and bad things, you imbecile, you fucking moron. Richard Dwartz. This guy is what we call a Nazball.
I don't like when people say that or the green-browns or the red-brown stuff because it accepts that these people say they are communists. They're not communists. It's anti-communist to use that stuff. People should stop.
He's a Marxist-Leninist.
Oh, that's a good question. If people can find where Jackson has outlined what his interpretation of Lenin's view on electoralism, and I'd love to watch that video.
It's about drive. It's about power. We stay hungry. We devour. Put in the work, put in the hours, and take what's ours. My Chandler, pathetic that Sam continues to stand the preferentially treated AOC despite her not coming on even a single time this week. I'd have to pull your COINTELPRO funding, pal. Real ace attorney. I've never seen a Marxist-Leninist so obsessed with the Democratic Party congressional politics. Yeah. Another unimpressive, mediocre white guy with way too much undeserved confidence. Thank you for presenting an all-time goober, Sam. I'm really glad to know this unremarkable, uninteresting, insignificant person now. Well, if someone interesting would ask to come on, I'd put them on too. Rory Gatto, this Jackson guy is a dick, a liar, uses terms he doesn't understand, and is bad at human interaction. Ivermectin. Is this guy in marketing for Adderall? Homeless Jess. Emma, Sam, what do you think about Anna Kasparian's take on homelessness? Personally, it's sad to see progressives fall for stupid narratives. She's very influential, and she recently advocated, promoted the author of San Francisco.
I have no idea. I have no idea what that is.
What is that a book? San Francisco? Sicko?
I have no idea.
I don't know what it is. Will from Indiana. I had no idea this debate was happening so soon, and when I checked in, I think my eyes and brain melted simultaneously with the chat. Good God. Sorry about that. All right, 3 more. Shantastic. Used to be a Sam Seder viewer, then you aired your anti-vegan views and censored Comrade Emma. Now I'm not a viewer, though I do watch your show live every day, looking for something to attack you on. Check out my latest takedown at my YouTube channel. Sebastian Lamba. If you're going to debate randos from YouTube, Sam, debate me on how I'm a bigger Velvet Underground fan than you, you fucking poser. I don't know about that. All right. The final IM of the day. So what concession do they get from Pelosi for withholding their vote that passes the Senate?
Yeah, they would demand a $15 minimum wage, and all the Republicans and stuff that were supporting those bills, and the corporate Democrats would just be like, "Oh yeah, we'll still support it."
Mm-hmm.
Folks, I apologize. Emma will be here tomorrow.
Yep.
I'll be here Friday. See you. Oh, Matt, Bradley, Emma, good job today. Audience, way to hang in there.
Sorry.
See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I